Chapter 330. Both Cheonghua and Yujie ran out hurriedly. Qin Wanru asked several old maids at the door to help Shui Rulin to a small empty yard on one side. After she hid on the bed, Shui Rulin was still very awake. Her hands still tightly grasped Qin Wanru's wrist, but her face was as pale as snow. "Mother, you still have me and the little brother in your belly." Qin Wanru lowered her head, whispered in her ear, and looked at her firmly. "My belly hurts." Shui Rulin's pale forehead began to overflow with sweat, and she said with difficulty in a hoarse voice, "Mother, it's okay. It will be fine. I have learned medical skills from Mingqiu Nun." Qin Wanru smiled and comforted her softly. "Close your eyes first, and you will be fine after a while. It will be fine." As she said, she reached out to rub the acupoints on Shui Rulin's forehead. While rubbing, she asked, "Mother, do you feel better now? Is it not so painful?" Her voice was gentle and her tone was gentle. She was not shocked at all and even had a smile on her face. This kind of feeling affected Shui Rulin's emotions. This feeling affected Shui Rulin's mood because although her belly still hurt faintly, it didn't seem to be so painful as before. "Mother, talk to me. Take deep breaths and stay calm." Seeing Shui Rulin's look relaxed, Qin Wanru heaved a sigh of relief in her heart. She reached out to pinch the acupoint on Shui Rulin's thumb, and then continued to say with a smile. That pair of eyes with a bit of coldness was hidden in a place where others couldn't see. The baby in Shui Rulin's belly was almost gone. Just a little bit more. In this life, she had been carefully protecting the baby in Shui Rulin's belly. She had almost considered all the adverse factors, but she didn't expect that there would be such an accident. Shui Rulin's situation was particularly bad just now, but she didn't dare to show it on her face, for fear of scaring Shui Rulin. At this time, she finally calmed down. The doctor came quickly and soon arrived in the yard. After diagnosing and treating Shui Rulin, he left the medicine for preventing miscarriage that he specially brought. Shui Rulin had calmed down at this time. Qin Wanru asked Cheonghua to go back and find an empty bed. After a while, she would take Shui Rulin back to her own yard. As for the medicine left by the doctor, Qin Wanru asked Cheonghua to boil it first. After taking the set of needles from Yujie, Qin Wanru carefully performed acupuncture on Shui Rulin. After the acupuncture, Shui Rulin fell asleep with a peaceful face. Cheonghua took some people to carry Shui Rulin back. Qin Wanru followed them all the way to Lufeng courtyard. After waking Shui Rulin up, she asked her to drink a bowl of decocted medicine and then let her rest again. When everything was done, Qin Wanru stood in the corridor and felt that her back was wet with sweat. Shui Rulin was almost killed. Her watery eyes turned to a certain point in the sky, and her eyes became colder and colder. Did her mother notice something? If it was only Qin Yuru, how could she be so distracted and suffer such a big blow all of a sudden? "Second miss, should we inform Madame Dowager and the general?" Cheonghua also left, closed the door carefully, and asked in a low voice. Until now, her face was still pale. If Qin Wanru was not here just now, Cheonghua might be so panicked that she didn't know how to deal with it. Fortunately, second miss was here. Cheonghua looked at Qin Wanru with more gratitude in her eyes. If something really happened to Shui Rulin, none of them, who served her closely, would end up well. "Mother has recovered now. Don't disturb father and grandmother." Qin Wanru still looked in the direction of the study. When she sent Shui Rulin here, the conversation in the study was still going on. Grandma and father were still discussing something. Duke Xing's mansion? And Great Elder Princess's mansion? Madame D and Qin Yuru had already used this as their background and were even threatening father. "I'll go back first. Mother is fine now. After she wakes up, she can take a bowl of medicine and then rest slowly every day. She shouldn't work hard these days. If something happens and I'm not here, you can report to me. I'll also come to help mother with acupuncture these days." Qin Wanru ordered. "Yes, second miss." Cheonghua nodded repeatedly. What happened just now had made her obedient to Qin Wanru. After arranging everything, Qin Wanru went back with Yujie. Along the way, Qin Wanru kept silent. Although the current situation was broken by her, The pair of blood jade bracelets as a token was lost, and Qin Yuru was temporarily locked up. Duke Xing's mansion would not let it go. And Madame D and her daughter would not be peaceful either. Miss, can First Miss really get the support of Duke Xing's mansion and Great Elder Princess? And Great Elder Princess didn't like First Miss very much last time, right? Yujie followed a few steps in silence and asked confusedly. It's possible. Qin Wanru nodded implicitly. If the truth was not exposed, it was very likely that and Great Elder Princess would think that Qin Yuru was the only daughter of her daughter, Infanta Qinghua. Naturally, she would stand on Qin Yuru's side. With the support of Duke Xing's mansion and Great Elder Princess, Qin Yuru and Madame D might stand at the same height in the last life. However, there was one thing she didn't understand. In the last life, and Great Elder Princess didn't seem to recognize Qin Yuru, and Qin Yuru finally entered Duke Xing's mansion in the name of being liked by old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion. She didn't really recognize her ancestors. Was there anything else she didn't know? Ruian Great Elder Princess had lost her only daughter. How could she not recognize her only granddaughter? Unless Ruian Great Elder Princess did not approve of it. But why did Ruian Great Elder Princess not approve of it? Since old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion admitted it, why didn't Ruian Great Elder Princess admit it? He thought, does Ruian Great Elder Princess have some news? Miss, what should we do? Yujie said with lingering fear. If Madame D and First Miss get the upper hand, Second Miss and Madame Shui will suffer. Look at First Miss's fierce look today. I'm afraid that she wanted to eat you. Qin Yuru was really mad today, so she behaved abnormally. But it could also be seen that this idea had always existed in her heart, and Madame D had instilled this idea in her in the past. Then let her stay in the house for a few more days. Didn't my father say that she should learn etiquette before going out? Nanny Zheng should know what etiquette is the most important. Qin Wanru suddenly smiled, and her red lips were as beautiful as peach and plum. Yujie thought for a while, and her eyes lit up. She clapped her hands and said, yes, let Nanny Zheng talk to Nanny Huang. In fact, Nanny Huang is also responsible for this. She is First Miss's etiquette instructor. How could she teach First Miss like this? Qin Wanru smiled faintly and said nothing. Today, Qin Yuru was judged to be uneducated, behaving abnormally, and losing the decency of a miss from an aristocratic family. This judgment was actually promising. It sounded very loose and not a big deal. She just needed to be educated well. But if the etiquette instructor thought that she had not learned etiquette well, Qin Yuru could still be locked up for a period of time. Qin Wanru did not expect that Qin Yuru would be locked up forever. She was now Qin Huayong's only daughter, Di Yan's fiancée, and what she had said before. It was destined that Qin Yuru could not be supervised all the time. But at least it could prolong the time, making them feel that they would be locked up forever, and they would definitely do something desperate. Qin Huayong did not say how long Qin Yuru would be locked up. Of course, his purpose was not to be locked up for a long time, but sometimes it could be understood as being locked up forever. If she did not mess up, she could let them mess up. If she started a few fires, it would be more messy, and her origin could be uncovered slowly. Her fingers unconsciously stroked a letter in her cuff. The letter that Chu Luchen specially asked Xiao Xuanzi to send to her must not be a simple letter. Mother, what do you think of this matter? Seeing everyone leave, Qin Huayong reached out to rub the area between his eyebrows and said, this is the bracelet sent by old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion. No matter what, it is our mansion's fault that it is broken now. If Duke Xing's mansion makes a fuss about this matter, I am afraid that Yuru will be reprimanded and her reputation will be affected. Qin Huayong really had a headache now, so he ignored the strange appearance of Shui Ruolin when she went out just now. Madame Dowager picked up the teacup at hand and took a sip. She raised her head with gloomy eyes and said with a somewhat serious face, Yonga, do you still protect Yuru now? Mother, why do you say so? Yuru did do something wrong and was indeed misled by Madame D. But no matter what she did not do, she is my only child. What do you want me to do? What's more, now there is Duke Yong's mansion and even Duke Xing's mansion. I can't lock her up for a lifetime, can I? Qin Huaiyong sighed helplessly and frowned. He stood up, walked out of the desk, walked to Madame Dowager and bowed deeply. "Mother, I apologize for what Yuru said before. I will never forget how you brought me up, how you took me away after my father passed away, and how you raised me up." His words were extremely sad, and the eyes of such a determined person turned red involuntarily. During those days, mother and son depended on each other. But for fear of being involved in what happened at that time, Madame Dowager basically did not go out and only hired someone to educate Qin Huaiyong at home. Speaking of this, both mother and son felt very sad. "Young, it's not your fault." Madame Dowager's eyes also turned red. She reached out to pat Qin Huaiyong's hand and said in a choked voice, "Mother, I know it's all Madame D's fault. I shouldn't have married Madame D at that time. But Yuru is my daughter after all, and she is going to marry Duke Yong's mansion. I can't just lock her up for a lifetime." Qin Huaiyong looked at Madame Dowager and said sincerely, "I see. Then we will do as you said and educate her well. In the future, when she educates her well, we will talk about it." Madame Dowager nodded. Even though she raised Qin Huaiyong, she could not say that she had to punish Qin Yuru at this time. Chapter 331. Yong, tell me, why does old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion value Yuru so much? I heard that old Madame has not been in charge of the family affairs for many years. She even doesn't go out to meet some relatives. Why does she suddenly like Yuru so much that she even surpassed Miss Qi at the banquet of Madame of Duke Xing's mansion to recognize her daughter? Madame Dowager didn't answer Qin Huaiyong's words, but looked up at him. Her gaze made Qin Huaiyong quite uncomfortable. He turned his head and coughed in a low voice, then turned around and said, "Mother, I don't know why Yuru is interested in Duke Xing's mansion. Old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion is jealous. Maybe it's a coincidence. I didn't go to Duke Xing's mansion today, so I still don't know what happened." "Yong, is it really good for Yuru's reputation that she changed her age? Doesn't the first young master of Qi's mansion know it? Aren't you afraid that he will be angry and reveal all the things that happened in Jiangzhou? In this way, the loss outweighs the gain, right?" Madame Dowager's voice became lower and lower. She looked at Qin Huaiyong with no joy or anger in her eyes, but only coldness. "Mother, Qi Tianyu won't say it. I have already talked with him. Our mansion is sorry for what happened to Yuru, but it is not irreparable. It is actually old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion's idea to say that Yuru is 2 years younger. I don't think Di Yen said anything, but Duke Yong's mansion said that it is good for them to get married 2 years later." "Madame D." Qin Huaiyong stopped as if he wanted to say something. "How about Madame D?" Madame Dowager's attention was attracted. "Madame D is so improper, and now she has such a reputation. She always occupies the position of my legal wife. When my colleagues talk about her, I always feel ashamed." Qin Huaiyong let out a sigh, and he looked slightly dispirited. Madame Dowager's hand trembled and hit the teacup beside her, but she didn't care about the pain at this time. She was so shocked that she lowered her voice and said, "Do you want to—" "Mother, you misunderstood me. How could I think so? I just said that I don't plan to let Madame D come out anymore because of her current condition, but I'm afraid that Duke Yong's mansion will make a fuss about it. Now that Duke Yong's mansion has spoken about Yuru, just do as they say. At least they can't say anything about Madame D." Qin Huaiyong said. Madame Dowager naturally understood what he meant. He was using Qin Yuru and Madame D to make a deal with Duke Yong's mansion. Since Duke Yong's mansion had intervened in Qin Yuru's affairs, they could not interfere in Madame D's affairs. Moreover, Qin Huaiyong did not divorce Madame D, nor did he mistreat her. He just asked her to come out, which was really embarrassing. In Jingxin Monastery in Jiangzhou, Madame D's crime of hurting Qin Wanru had been mostly confirmed. Besides, with the testimony of the young Madame of Duke Yangxiu and the testimony of the coachman, if Madame D was released, Duke Yong's mansion would also lose face. After all, this vicious woman was also the daughter of Duke Yong's mansion. From this point of view, Qin Yuru was much better. At least her reputation was not out of control. But I can't just lock him up in the backyard, can I? If he's always locked up like this? The old mistress said hesitantly. Of course, we can't lock her up in the mansion all the time. After things settle down for a while, send Madame D away and find a nunnery for her to pray for blessings. Qin Huaiyong explained. Will Duke Yong's mansion agree? The old mistress thought this was not feasible. The old madam of Duke Yong's mansion doted on Madame D very much. How could she watch Madame D fall into such a situation? Qin Huaiyong hesitated for a moment and seemed to find it difficult to say. But after thinking for a while, he still said, Mother, I have an idea. I don't know if it's feasible. What? The old mistress asked. Secretly send Madame D back to Duke Yong's mansion. What do you think? Qin Huaiyong said implicitly. The old mistress didn't understand his words. She looked at Qin Huaiyong with her dizzy eyes and motioned him to continue. That is to send Madame D back to Duke Yong's mansion. But we won't say that we have divorced her. We just let her live in Duke Yong's mansion from then on, so that old madam of Duke Yong's mansion won't forgive her. Qin Huaiyong explained. The old mistress fell silent. She frowned and looked at the ground. She understood Qin Huaiyong's words. On the surface, Madame D was still the legal madam of Qin's mansion. But because of her vicious nature, it was said that she was sent to the nunnery to rest and pray for her two daughters. But in fact, she was sent back to Duke Yong's mansion. In this way, at least the old madam, who doted on her daughter, wouldn't make trouble. As for Duke Yong's mansion, Madame D was secretly sent to their mansion, so it was inconvenient for others to know. After all, Madame D's reputation was too bad now. With such a reputation, if Duke Yong's mansion didn't protect her, she would basically be divorced. How could they keep the position of legal madam for the sake of Duke Yong's mansion's dignity? If you send Madame D back to Duke Yong's mansion, what about Yuru? After a long while, the old mistress raised her head and asked. Yuru will naturally be raised by you. Although you are not in good health, I still want to trouble you to educate her. She has been misguided by her mother. Now she can stay for 2 more years. She can be taken care of by you for 2 more years and be educated by etiquette instructors for a longer time. In this way, she won't cause trouble like Madame D in the future. Qin Huaiyong looked at the old mistress expectantly. He suddenly stood up, lifted his robe, and knelt in front of the old mistress. Mother, please grant me this wish. Yong, get up. I promise you. I am afraid that Madame D is not willing to do this, and Yuru will also make trouble. The old mistress sighed and reached out to pull Qin Huaiyong. Qin Huaiyong stood up with her hand and still sat on the chair beside her. Mother, don't worry. I will deal with this matter. I will not do it all at once. There must be a process of communicating with Duke Yong's mansion. I believe they will think this is very good. As for Yuru, mother, please take care of her. Yuru is my granddaughter. Of course, I want her to be well. If Madame D is gone, I will take care of her myself if I am healthy. If I am not, I will ask Rulin to take care of her. What do you think? Old Grandma said. She knew her own health well. If it were a few years ago, she would have the energy to manage the affairs of the backyard. Later, when her health became worse and worse, she had to let Madame D take care of the affairs of the backyard. She was also powerless to educate her 2 granddaughters. When her old illness broke out, she couldn't get up all day, so how could she educate her granddaughters? I'll do as you say, mother. Qin Huaiyong nodded obediently. What do we do now? Yuru smashed old madam of Duke Xing's mansion's bracelets. She should tell old madam of Duke Xing's mansion about it, right? Madam Dowager changed the topic again. Since what happened to Qin Wanru, Madam Dowager did think about asking Qin Huaiyong to divorce Madame D, but she also knew that it was impossible. Duke Yong's mansion would not stop and would even take Qin Huaiyong's mansion. Madame D married in the past. Qin Huaiyong was a descendant of an aristocratic family, so Duke Yong's mansion could completely break off the engagement. Later, it was heard that they did have such an intention, and the marriage was delayed again and again. But at least they didn't break off the engagement in the end. Old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion personally sent Madame D to Madame Dowager. This was also a good deed of Duke Yong's mansion. Although Madame D had a vicious reputation now, and it was okay for Qin Huaiyong to divorce her. If the matter in the past was mentioned, Qin Huaiyong would still be said to be ungrateful, and it would even make people doubt Qin Huaiyong's character. Madame Dowager didn't know much about the affairs of the officialdom, but when Old Master was still alive, he once told Madame Dowager that it didn't matter if a woman in the inner courtyard couldn't help her in the officialdom, but she couldn't drag her down in everything. Now, Madame Dowager also thought that this sentence was applicable to Qin Huaiyong. This was also the reason why she didn't mention it to Qin Huaiyong, although she wanted to divorce Madame D. She knew Qin Huaiyong's difficulties, and now Qin Huaiyong explained it to her, which made her feel very satisfied. This might indeed be the best way to solve this matter. Mother, how about we say that the two sisters accidentally smashed it when they were playing? Qin Huaiyong glanced at the door and said, "There are so many people who saw it, so it's hard to explain." Madame Dowager shook her head and didn't agree. This matter was seen by so many people, and it was quite big, so it was really not easy to explain. Moreover, Qin Wanru said it was really innocent, and Madame Dowager felt that this sentence was too partial to Qin Yuru. Zhuozua's biological father died to save you. You won't treat Zhuozhua as your biological daughter like Madame D, right? Mother, how could I do this? But in this situation, there must be an explanation. Qin Huaiyong stood up, walked around in the room with a little annoyance, and frowned tightly. Madame Dowager picked up the jade bracelets on the table and looked at them. Try to find another pair of good jade bracelets. Just say that the pair broken on the street is Yuru's own pair, not the pair of old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion. Can't they see it? Qin Huaiyong really didn't know much about this kind of women's jewelry. He sat down in surprise, picked up a piece and looked at it. Maybe they can see it, but since this pair of bracelets has been given to Yuru, it is also Yuru's. Even if it is broken, old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion can't say anything. But in public, it is a quarrel, and it is broken, so we have to give old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion an explanation, in case she thinks we don't make her lose face. If it was broken in Qin's mansion, as long as they didn't say it, old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion wouldn't know it, so naturally there was no need to tell her, in case she would be angry. Then let's do it. Qin Huaiyong thought for a moment, nodded and agreed. I will ask Rulin to do it. Ask her to look around the street when she is free, and buy suitable ones if she sees them. Madame Dowager basically didn't go out, and Qin Wanru was too young, so only Shui Rulin was suitable. Chapter 332. Qin Huaiyong also frowned tightly. After a long while, he said, just say that Yuru has encountered evil spirits and has been avoiding them in the mansion recently. This is the only way. Madame Dowager nodded and said helplessly, do you want to send someone to drive away the evil spirits in the mansion again? That's not necessary. Qin Yuru had a bad reputation. Fortunately, Diyan also had a bad reputation. In addition, Duke Yong's mansion was Madame D's maiden home, so this marriage would not be broken off. This was also a blessing in misfortune. Since the matter was settled, Qin Huaiyong sent Madame Dowager to the door of the room. Madame Dowager, Madame Shui is not well. Seeing them coming out, the servant who was guarding the door hurriedly came to report. When did it happen? Madame Dowager's legs softened, and her anxious face immediately changed. Just now, Madame Shui couldn't stand it when she walked out of the courtyard. Later, Second Miss took Madame Shui to the courtyard on the side to have a rest and also invited a doctor to come over. Madame Shui was finally carried away. The servant reported with sweat all over his head. At that time, he saw that the situation was not good and wanted to help, but was refused by Qianghua. Mother, I'll go and have a look first. Qin Huaiyong strode out, and he was really anxious. He was really looking forward to the child in Shui Rulin's belly. Okay, go quickly, I'll be right there. Madame Dowager answered repeatedly. Qin Huaiyong went out of the courtyard with a servant and went to the Chuehua gate. When he just arrived at the Chuehua gate, a servant girl suddenly bumped out from the side. Because she was frightened, she staggered a few steps and happened to fall at his feet. General. She raised her delicate face and immediately called out when she saw clearly that it was Qin Huaiyong in front of her. Qin Huaiyong glanced at the beautiful and different face of the servant girl. His eyes darkened, But he didn't stop. He made a turn and strode away. The servant walked behind him and recognized that this servant girl was the servant girl named Huang Rui in front of Madame D. With a trace of sarcasm on his face, he also bypassed her and strode away. Although he had never seen this kind of trick in the general's mansion, he had heard of it. It was said that it was usually a trap to hook up with the male master. The servant girl of Madame D looked like an ordinary girl from a good family. She was actually a frivolous girl who wanted to hook up with the master, unlike other servant girls who were humble. Their general was extremely anxious now, so how could he have the time to pay attention to this servant girl? As if they didn't see the servant girl, they both bypassed her and ignored Huang Rui. Huang Rui looked at Qin Huaiyong's back in disbelief. She really couldn't believe that she couldn't make Qin Huaiyong stop even a little with her current appearance. The nanny who had taught her in the past had said that men would take pity on her in this state. Why didn't the general even look at her? Miss Huang Rui, get up quickly. The ground is very cold. In winter, a delicate girl like you will hurt her health. The old maid guarding the Chuehua gate looked at Huang Rui with a smile and came over to pull her up. Huang Rui's face turned red. Although the old maid didn't laugh at her, she obviously knew something from her look. If it was successful, she wouldn't be afraid of what an old maid would say. But now it was not successful, and an old maid saw her make a fool of herself. She was ashamed and angry. She pushed away the old maid's hand, got up by herself, gritted her teeth and was about to leave. Miss Huang Rui, where are you going? Is that the outer court? The old maid reminded her with a smile. Huang Rui realized that she was anxious and went in the wrong direction, so she hurriedly turned back. Miss Huang Rui, do you know why the general is so anxious? The old maid asked with a smile. Huang Rui stopped, adjusted her attitude, turned around, and tried to show a peaceful attitude. Why? Madame Shui is ill. The old maid looked around and lowered her voice. What illness? Huang Rui's eyes lit up. It's not a serious illness. She is just a little uncomfortable. Every time Madame Shui is uncomfortable, the general is always the most anxious. The old maid whispered and pointed in the direction of Shui Ruolin's courtyard. Now Madame Shui is the most important person in the general's heart. At this time, the general can't make Madame Shui angry. She is the future young master. The old maid's voice became lower and lower, and she reached out to touch her belly. Seeing Huang Rui's thoughtful look, the old maid got closer and said, if it is a young master, he is the only heir of the mansion. The first miss born by Madame D is a woman. She can't be compared with him. Will Madame Shui really give birth to a young master? Huang Rui bit her lip and couldn't help asking. Probably. It's said that someone has seen it. Now the general is more careful. If anything happens to Madame Shui, anyone who runs into her will die. The old maid said cautiously and confidently, Miss Huang Rui, don't run into her at this time. If you die, you don't even know how you die. You will be killed? Huang Rui's face, which was still red just now, immediately turned pale, and her voice trembled. Don't you know that the general has killed many rebels before? The blood was like a river, and the dead people were piled up as big as a mountain. The general is not a gentle civil official in the capital city. At most, he will just beat you a few times or drive you away. The old maid said. I was sent by Duke Yong's mansion. The indenture contract is still in Duke Yong's mansion. Huang Rui's hair stood on end when she heard this, but she still resisted and said, So what? The old maid curled her lips disdainfully. Will Duke Yong's mansion really fight against our general's mansion because of a servant girl? She was just a servant girl. Even if she was not a servant girl of Ningyuan Army General's mansion, the slave contract was not in her hands. If her master didn't want to make a big fuss about her, the servant girl's death was not a big deal. Nothing could be done. When our general quelled the rebellion, he was very experienced in interrogating prisoners. He could make people cry for a few days without dying, but there was not a piece of good flesh on their bodies. Speaking of this, the old maid also trembled and looked around guiltily, as if Qin Huaiyong had sent someone to watch here at this time. Huang Rui felt that the wind was colder today, almost blowing into her bones. Every bone was cold and gloomy, and her lips suddenly became pale. She suddenly regretted. Ning Yuan army general was such a homicidal maniac. How could she dare to seduce him? If something really happened, she might not even have a corpse, let alone her life. She seemed to see the scene that Qin Huaiyong stabbed her with a sharp dagger dripping with blood. Such a scene made her legs weak, and she fell to the ground with a plop. This time she really fell down, not the scene that she deliberately rushed over at the right time and fell in front of Qin Huaiyong in a delicate way. Miss Huangrui, what's wrong with you? Get up quickly. Is it because of the cold weather that your feet are numb? A girl like you, who is so beautiful, is not destined to be a servant girl. You should find a good master. No young master will like you when he sees you like this. The old maid came over enthusiastically and wanted to help her up again. Huangrui's lips were trembling, and she couldn't say a word. Fortunately, the old maid was strong enough. She half supported and half carried her up, patted the corner of her dirty clothes and murmured, "A man like Child D is the most tender to women. I heard that the child even fought with other childs from aristocratic families for a girl from a brothel. Our mansion didn't say anything, and even secretly took the girl in." These words didn't seem to be said to Huangrui, but they directly fell into the bottom of Huangrui's heart, as if something had taken root in her heart, which originally had some thoughts, making her feel a little warm in the winter. With a flash of inspiration, she immediately stopped trembling. The heir of Duke Yong now seemed to be the only one who could help her solve the situation. Since the heir of Duke Yong was tender to women, and he could fight with his family for a girl, and even let his family accept a girl from a brothel, then her problem was not a problem at all. The contract was in the hands of old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion. Would old Madam embarrass her grandson? Thinking of this, Huangrui regained her strength and stood firm with the old maid's hand. Suddenly, she remembered something she had heard before and asked in a gossiping manner, "I heard that the first miss can't marry Child D for the time being?" The old maid smiled. "It's not like that. I don't know why the first miss and Madam D are so assured. If Child D gives birth to a son in these 2 years, he will be the eldest son. This eldest son is different from other children, and he can even inherit Duke Yong's mansion." The old maid said with a smile. The eldest son, even the eldest son of a concubine, was different for a family. If the general had no legitimate son, the eldest son of a concubine would be the heir. Thinking of this, Huangrui's heart became hot. Compared with the dead end of Ning Yuan army general, this was not only a way to live, but also a bright road. As long as the plan was right, this matter was simply easy. Huangrui was moved. Why didn't she think of it before? In the past, although she belonged to Duke Yong's mansion, she was not in Duke Yong's mansion. There were only some girls of the same age around her, and the teachers were a few old maids. She didn't even see a man around her. Now the opportunity was so good, and she was in Ning Yuan army general's mansion. No one was prepared to meet the heir of Duke Yong's mansion. "I'll go back to take care of Madam first." Fearing that the old maid would find that there was something wrong with her expression, Huangrui hurriedly said. She also bowed to the old maid politely, thanked her for helping her just now, and then left gracefully. Looking at the back of Huangrui going away, the old maid smiled so brightly that the wrinkles on her face almost bloomed. The thing that Nanny Yu told her was finally done. She had long told her to keep an eye on this servant girl named Huangrui. Now she rushed out by herself, which was just right. Chapter 333. Huangrui hurried back to Madame D's Yulon pavilion. After entering the door, she smiled at the 2 inferior old maids guarding the door and said, "Nannies, I just went to get some ginseng for Madame, which was sent by Duke Yong's mansion before for Madame to nurse her body." As she said, she handed over a ginseng in her hand and a purse. The 2 old maids snorted coldly, and one of them took her purse and said, "Go in, Madame is waiting to use it." "Thank you, Nanny," Huangrui said and turned into the yard. Under the porch of the courtyard, Hongye was standing under the porch. Seeing her coming in, she hurriedly waved to her. Huangrui walked over quietly. "Nanny Zhou is talking with Madame inside. You go in later," Hongye whispered. But Huangrui nodded. When Nanny Zhou and Madame talked, Nanny Zhou didn't want them to hear. Last time, they just stood a little closer, and then they were interrogated by Nanny Zhou as if they were two thieves. Later, Madame D even interrogated them again and scolded them to stay away from them. Therefore, Huang Rui didn't dare to go over at this time. Looking at the closed door, she knew that Madame and Nanny Zhou must be discussing something again. "How is the first miss today?" Hong Ye lowered her voice and asked. "She was locked up. I heard that she beat and scolded second miss on the street, and many people saw it." Huang Rui smiled bitterly and felt very helpless. Although she was a servant girl, she also knew that this kind of thing couldn't be done. Beating and scolding her own younger sister on the street, even if she beat and scolded her own servant girl, would also lose her reputation. What was the first miss thinking? But suddenly she felt happy. Since the first miss was so stupid, she would have more profits in the future. Previously, she stood on Madame's side and felt that the first miss was extremely stupid. Now thinking about it, she suddenly felt that it was a good thing. Suddenly, a smile appeared on her face. Seeing her sudden smile, Hong Ye was stunned. "Why do you still dare to smile?" "I didn't smile. You saw it wrong." Huang Rui hurriedly calmed down and explained. "Did I see it wrong?" Hong Ye looked at her face suspiciously. At this time, Huang Rui's face was full of worry. She really thought that her eyes were dazzled, so she warned her, "You have to be careful. If Madame sees you like this, I'm afraid that you will be punished." Madame D had scolded Huang Rui many times and even slapped and kicked her because Huang Rui failed to hook Qin Huayong before. Thinking of this, Huang Rui's eyes showed a trace of hatred. "Huang Rui, don't worry, I won't. First miss has been grounded by the general, so I'm afraid she won't be able to sneak in to see Madame again. Now that she's in this state, how can she have a way out?" Huang Rui sighed. Her words made Hong Ye speechless. She looked at another slim figure in the yard and was speechless for a while. That was Qin Shui, who had also been sent here. She was supposed to be a principal servant girl, but now she was working as a servant girl's assistant. Weren't the two of them the same? Qing said. Qing, and S said, "Madame was match." After a moment of silence, Hong Ye could not help but ask, "Have you been unable to meet the general?" Huang Rui didn't tell the truth. "I didn't meet them. There are so many people around the general. It's not easy to meet them. Besides, I can't always go out of Chuehua Gate. You'd better hurry up. When you leave, take me with you. I don't want to stay here forever." Red Leaf begged in a low voice. They had been with Madame D for a lifetime. Thinking of Madame D's somewhat crazy and ferocious eyes, they both felt a chill in their hearts and their backs. Originally, he thought that it was a good place, but now, he realized that it was clearly a fire pit. Huang Rui reached out to hold Hong Yi and said in a low voice, "If I go out, I will take you with me." "Okay, then I will serve you as a maid in the future." Hong Yi held Huang Rui's hand backhandedly and said sincerely. Hong Yi knew that Huang Rui's purpose of entering the mansion was to hook up with Ningyuan army general, and she was just a cover. She could do the work of serving people, but the main thing was Huang Rui. If Huang Rui became a concubine, Hong Yi felt that it would be more promising to follow Huang Rui than to follow Madame D. Madame D was just an empty shell in Ningyuan army general's mansion. Almost everyone knew that she had no hope, but she was still an empty shell. She looked good, but in fact she had been eaten into her heart and was hollowed out. "Do you want to take her in as well?" Hong Yi raised her chin and pointed at Qin Shui, who was working in the yard. In Hong Ye's view, she and Huang Rui were both outsiders. As soon as they entered Ningyuan army general's mansion, they went directly to Yulan Pavilion and didn't know anything about the general's mansion. But Qin Shui was different. She was brought here from Jiangzhou, so she naturally knew everything in the mansion. "Let's take a look first." Huang Rui nodded and also thought that Qin Shui's choice was good. Both of them looked at Qin Shui, which made Qin Shui look up at them. The two of them nodded to Qin Shui with a kind smile, and Qin Shui also nodded slightly. Qin Shui now lived with Huang Rui. Except that Huang Rui gave Qin Shui a bad start at the beginning, she had been good to Qin Shui since then. Of course, her purpose was to take Qin Shui in. The door of the main room opened. Nanny Zhou came out with a sullen face and said loudly, "Huang Yi, you are back. Come here, Madame wants to see you." Huang Rui hurried forward and followed Nanny Zhou into the inner room. After a while, there came the sound of broken porcelain and Huang Rui's painful cry. Hong Yi shivered to one side and lowered her head. Knowing that First Miss had such a thing, how could Madame not be angry? The night was getting dark. The weather in winter got dark very early. Just after dinner, the outside could not be seen clearly, and only the whistling wind could be heard. Qin Wanru hadn't had dinner yet. Qin Wanru hadn't had her dinner yet. She just came back from outside with Yu Jie and Qin Yu. Chu Lu came over and lifted the curtain for her. She also helped her take off the light pink cloak with a circle of fox fur, revealing her delicate and beautiful face. Even if she just came back from outside, Qin Wanru's face was still very good. Her pink and tender little face was almost full of water. Her big bright eyes, under the fluttering of her long eyelashes, made people feel that they were more black and watery, revealing a kind of aura. Her delicate and beautiful lips were slightly raised, and it seemed that she was in a good mood. She walked slowly to the chair and sat down. Several servant girls took out the dinner from the basket and served the meal for her. The reason why she came back so late was that she went to see Shui Rulin, felt her pulse, and performed acupuncture on her. After confirming that Shui Rulin was indeed fine, Qin Wanru was relieved and came back. Since he knew about Shui Rulin's matter, Qin Huaiyong had been in Shui Rulin's Lufeng pavilion and didn't have time to have dinner just now. It could be seen that he was really anxious. The dinner was very simple, with 5 dishes and 1 soup. After Qin Wanru ate a little, she put it down. She didn't have much appetite because she liked something light. In the past, the dishes sent by the kitchen were mainly light. But today, 3 dishes seemed to be a little too rich, which was not the taste she liked in the past. These dishes, what's wrong with them? Qin Wanru wiped her face with a handkerchief and asked casually. I heard that a new old maid has been changed. The previous one was dirty and was driven away, Chu Lu said. She went to take the dinner, and naturally saw that the dishes might not be to Qin Wanru's taste, so she specially asked. Dirty? When was she driven away? Qin Wanru blinked her watery eyes and asked. It was found in the afternoon. I heard that all the dirty things were found, and then she was beaten by concubine Su and driven out. Chu Lu said. Although Shui Rulin was in charge, the 2 concubines were basically in charge. It was not a big deal that concubine Su asked someone to drive out an old maid in the kitchen. What's more, something happened to Shui Rulin today. Even if something happened, it would basically not be reported to Shui Rulin. Qin Huaiyong stayed by Shui Rulin's side and would not let her worry about such a trivial matter. Where did the new old maid come from? Hearing the words, this afternoon, Qin Wanru's eyes flashed twice, and she leaned back and said slowly. She was recommended by another old maid in the kitchen. She didn't cook before. Chapter 334. Looking at the slightly closed door and window, she felt scared. She remembered that the window was closed before. Walking to the window, she reached out to close the slightly closed door and window. Looking at the window and out of the window, she found nothing. Then she went back to her bed. Her eyes fell on the letter in front of her. Thinking for a while, she picked up the letter, tore the envelope and pulled out the paper inside. After reading a few lines, she was shocked. She just glanced at it, but now she couldn't help reading it from the beginning to the end again. This time, even her breathing became rapid. Chu Li's father really came to the capital city. What she saw that day was right. The man was Chu Li's father. She thought that if she wanted to find Chu Li's father, she had to send someone to Jiangzhou. Qin Wanru was just a girl in the inner courtyard. How could she send someone to Jiangzhou? She didn't expect that Chu Luchen actually brought him to the capital city, and now he was settled in a courtyard in the capital city. When she left Jiangzhou, she just sighed with emotion that Chu Li's father was a loyal servant. In order to find his former master, he even sold his daughters as slaves, just to go to different mansions to find a trace of his former master. When she came to the capital city and slowly turned over some old things, she felt that it had something to do with her. Chu Li's father was obviously the person she was looking for. However, she had no one to use and no material resources to find him in Jiangzhou. She originally thought that after a period of time, she asked Chu Lu to write a letter and find a way to send it to Qi Baiyu. Then she asked him to find a way to send the letter to Jiangzhou and ask someone to find him. Compared with her, Qi Baiyu was more familiar with Jiangzhou than her, and some old people stayed in Jiangzhou. She didn't expect that Chu Luchen had already brought Chu Li's father to the capital city. She took a deep breath, and a trace of sadness flashed in her eyes. With Chu Li's father, she could be clearer about some things instead of relying on her own guesses. In order to solve the trap set by Madame of Duke Xing and Madame D, she had to restore her identity. The biggest problem was that no one could prove her identity. Now she had the first witness. Qin Wanru got up very late the next day. She didn't sleep well last night. All kinds of nightmares intertwined. She saw the stairs stained with blood in her previous life. She saw herself being slapped by Qin Yuru fiercely. She then asked the servant girl to hold her head and kowtow to her heavily. She also saw Madame Dowager kowtowing to Madame of Duke Xing to beg for mercy. She didn't know when she fell asleep. When she woke up in the morning, she had a dull headache. She touched her head and sat up. Yu Jie, who was waiting outside, hurried over and lifted the gauze curtain for her. Narrowing her eyes, Qin Wanru looked at the sunshine outside the window and asked, "Is it so late?" "It's okay. It's okay to sleep more in winter." Madame Dowager asked Nanny Duan to tell me that you don't need to go and pay respect to them today. I thought that you must be tired, so I didn't wake you up on purpose. Yu Jie said with a smile. "Grandma, what's the matter?" Qin Wanru's heart skipped a beat and she asked. "Yes, the first young master of the Qi family has come to pay his respects to old Madam." Yu Jie curled her lips and said, "I don't know why he came here. When Miss Qi was here, he didn't come here. Now that Miss Qi is not here, why does he come here?" This was really unexpected. Why did Qi Tianyu come at this time? It was really inexplicable. After getting up and washing, Qin Wanru had a little breakfast. However, she still felt a headache. Yu Jie looked at her and thought that she was sick, so she asked her to lie down and rest for a while. Qin Wanru felt that she couldn't fall asleep anymore. She thought it was better to go and see Shui Ruolin, so she took Yu Jie to Shui Ruolin's courtyard. When they walked outside and the cold wind blew, her headache was not so painful. Shui Ruolin's room was warm. As soon as she entered the door, she felt the warmth with the faint fragrance of plum blossoms. There were a few plum blossoms on the desk by the window, which made the room a little more fragrant. Shui Ruolin looked good because she didn't wear too much in the room. Leaning on the couch, she was talking to two concubines, Concubine Su and Concubine Dong. The two concubines seemed to be well behaved. They both sat on the stool in front of the couch, replying and listening to Shui Ruolin's instructions. Seeing Qin Wanru coming in, the two concubines hurriedly bowed and then stepped aside. "Wanru, come and sit here." Shui Ruolin greeted her with a smile. Maybe because the heater in the room was warm, her face was slightly red. "Mother, how do you feel today?" Qin Wanru came over and bowed, then sat down by the couch. "I'm fine. I'm fine." Shui Ruolin smiled softly. "Mother, even if you are fine, you shouldn't worry too much." Qin Wanru looked at the two concubines and said coquettishly, "I know, it's not a big deal. You told the two concubines yesterday to let them deal with some small things by themselves. They don't need to report to me." Shui Ruolin smiled, took Qin Wanru's hand and patted it. She seemed to be in a good mood. This made Qin Wanru feel relieved. "Concubines, if there is anything you can't solve, you can also report to me in the future. My health is not very good now, and my priority is to rest." Qin Wanru looked at Concubine Su and Concubine Dong with a smile. In the last life, she was actually in charge of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion. At that time, she had just married into the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion. As the second young madam, Gu Shishu made things difficult for her. She badmouthed her in front of Madame Zhua of the Deputy Prime Minister and left some messy things to her. If she did a good job, she would have no merit. If she did a bad job, it was all her fault. She didn't know anything at that time, so she was really in a hurry and made mistakes. Fortunately, with Wen Shiqi's help, she slowly managed everything neatly. But later, Gu Shishu made things difficult for her and took back the power of being in charge. "Yes, second miss. We don't dare to disturb Madam too much." The two concubines hurriedly said yes. Concubine Su, the old maid who cooked yesterday, was replaced? Qin Wanru smiled and looked at concubine Su, who greeted her respectfully. Qin Huayong's two concubines were not favored. In the last life, they had been living in the shadow of Madame D and were respectful to Madame D. Now Madame D was locked up, they were also respectful to Shui Rulin and were extremely obedient and reasonable. Second miss, the old maid stole a bracelet of an old maid who worked with her. When she was found, the bracelet was still on her wrist secretly. I was going to report this matter to Madame and let Madame deal with it. But the general said that such a trivial matter should be dealt with by me. I thought it was not appropriate to keep the old maid, so I directly drove her out and temporarily hired another one. I heard that the dishes are not bad. If second miss doesn't like it, I will fire the old maid and choose another one. That's not necessary. I just feel that the taste is not right. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and said, if you don't like it, you can eat the food in my small kitchen. Ask them to make one more and send it to you. Shui Rulin coughed in a low voice and said softly, Mother, it's not necessary. The taste is not bad. It's just that the old maid changed and didn't adjust my taste at once. Qin Wanru explained carelessly. It seemed that she just said it casually. Concubine Su peeped at Qin Wanru's expression and was relieved. It seemed that second miss just said it casually. When she went to the kitchen later, she would instruct the new old maid to be more careful when cooking. Second miss had always eaten and used bland food. Concubine Su, who was in charge of the kitchen, naturally knew this. Seeing that Qin Wanru and Shui Rulin seemed to have something to say, the two concubines left tactfully and walked out together. When they were outside the courtyard, Concubine Dong asked in a low voice, is there anything wrong with the old maid in the kitchen? Both of them were Qin Huayong's servant girls and they grew up together. Although they were not favored, they usually had a good relationship. They were also familiar with each other and would talk about some things in private. It should be that the taste of the dishes is different. Second miss can taste it. Concubine Su frowned and said while walking. Then, should we change someone else? Concubine Dong asked. I'll go to the kitchen to have a look. If it's really not good, we can change someone else. Second miss should be satisfied. Concubine Su thought for a while and said. She separated from Concubine Dong at the next intersection and hurried to the kitchen. Everyone in the mansion knew that Madame Shui and Second Miss were in charge now. Madame Shui trusted Second Miss very much, so they must not offend Second Miss. Seeing the two concubines leave, Shui Rulin waved her hand and other servant girls in the room also left. Even Qianghua pulled Yujia's hand and motioned her to leave with her. Yujia looked at Qin Wanru and Qin Wanru nodded silently. Yujia then left with Qianghua and closed the door for them when they walked to the door. She and Qianghua guarded the door on each side. The room became quiet. Shui Rulin sat up straight and reached out to hold Qin Wanru's hand. Looking at her delicate little face, she wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Mother, just say what you want to say. Qin Wanru said with a smile. Her little face was snow white and tender, which was very pleasing to the eye. Thinking that such a beautiful child should have both parents dead, Shui Rulin sighed. Now she could understand Madame Dowager's mood very well. Since she could not find her biological parents, then she should not tell her family background. At least she should let her know that she had parents and loved by relatives. She should not let her bear the pain of losing her biological parents at such a young age. But now Madame D and her daughter seemed to plot against Qin Wanru's family background, so she had to say it. Wanru, have you ever thought about finding your biological mother? Shui Rulin said euphemistically. Have you got any news about my mother? Do you know my family background? Qin Wanru fluttered her long eyelashes and asked excitedly. Yesterday, your grandmother said something about your family background. Shui Rulin didn't know whether what she said was right or wrong, so she became more and more hesitant. Mother, tell me, who are my biological parents and why did they leave me in the Qin's mansion? How could they be so cruel to leave me alone? Qin Wanru's voice unconsciously trembled and even cracked. Although these were all planned by her and she pushed them step by step, how could she not be excited when she could hear what happened at that time? But how could he not be excited when he heard what had happened in the past? He involuntarily grabbed Shui Ruolin's hand, and a deep red color appeared at the corner of his eyes. Chapter 335. Wanru, even if you don't have biological parents, I am still your mother. Shui Ruolin paused and repeated with a serious face. Mother, I know. Qin Wanru's long eyelashes fluttered twice, covering the excitement at the bottom of her eyes, and then she slowly closed her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, she was calm. Mother, tell me. Seeing that she finally calmed down, Shui Ruolin breathed a sigh of relief, took her hand, and told her what Madame Dowager had told her in an orderly manner. Qin Wanru held Shui Ruolin's hand very calmly. After the excitement, her brain worked very fast. After confirming the conjectures in her heart with Shui Ruolin's words one by one, she immediately understood some things that she couldn't figure out. Under her long eyes, her eyes were deep, as if there were huge waves in the deep sea that couldn't be seen clearly. After telling the cause and effect, Shui Ruolin sighed softly and slightly tightened her hand. Wanru, no matter what happens in the future, you still have me and Grandma. Mother. Qin Wanru raised her watery eyes and looked at Shui Ruolin deeply. She knew that Shui Ruolin was sincere and always knew that Shui Ruolin was on her side. Although she was weak, she was very reasonable. However, she was not blindly weak. She was very firm when she stood on her side in the study and openly raised an objection in front of her grandma and father. Don't blame your grandma. She is also afraid that no one will come to admit it after you know it, and you will be sad in vain. It is better to let you know nothing. Your grandma really wants to raise you as the daughter of Qin's mansion, but now. Shui Ruolin was very helpless. This matter was not something that Madame Dowager could cover up even if she wanted to. Madame Dowager asked her to investigate it before, so Shui Ruolin asked Qianghua to go out and inquire about Duke Xing's mansion. The result of the inquiry was that the former heir of Duke Xing's mansion died outside, and it was said that it was a rebellion. The former heir of Duke Xing's mansion secretly left with Infanta Qinghua because of the conflict between his wife and old madam. It seemed that they went to the army incognito. When Infanta Qinghua came back, she was already in a daze and only murmured the name of the former heir of Duke Xing's mansion. It seemed that she was scared silly. Everyone guessed that she and the former heir of Duke Xing's mansion were lost in the chaos. She was guarded by several servant girls, but in the end, these servant girls were all dead, and only she was alive. She should have seen the tragedy of several servant girls being killed and was scared silly. At that time, she was pregnant. Not long after she was brought back to Duke Xing's mansion, she gave birth to the current master Hao and died. No one knew what had happened at that time, let alone whether the former heir of Duke Xing's mansion was alive or not. But after so many years of no news, everyone had been sure that the former heir of Duke Xing had already died. Wanru, your big sister deliberately said that she was young. I asked Qianghua to investigate it. When she was born, it was the time when the former heir of Duke Xing and Infanta Qinghua left. If they had children at that time, they were about the same age. But if it is your age, it is also within the range. Shui Ruolin analyzed for Qin Wanru. Everyone said that Infanta Qinghua also gave birth to a daughter with the former heir of Duke Xing, but this daughter was also lost in the chaos. All these almost match with you. Your grandmother also said that your parents were not ordinary people at first sight. And the Fenghua glass cup was also found in your bag. Shui Ruolin told Qin Wanru everything she had inquired about and what she could associate with in detail. Mother, I know what to do. Qin Wanru nodded and said softly. Shui Ruolin sighed again in a low voice and said, Wanru, no matter what you want to do, I will support you. Mother, take care of the fetus at ease. Don't worry about things that don't need to worry about. I know what to do. Qin Wanru said with a smile. Since a corner of the truth had been revealed, let it be revealed. Her grandmother would be her second witness. After coming out of Shui Ruolin's courtyard, Qin Wanru went back to her courtyard first. She called Chulu, packed up what she needed, and walked out with Yujie and Chulu. She had already known that Qin Huaiyong asked her to find another pair of blood jade bracelets when she was in Shui Ruolin's residence. It was inconvenient for Shui Rulin to move now, so Qin Wanru volunteered to do it for her. Unexpectedly, when she turned out of the path and walked to the main road leading to the outside, she saw Qi Tianyu also coming from the side path. That was old grandma's Xining pavilion. Second Miss Qin. Seeing Qin Wanru, Qi Tianyu was stunned for a moment, and then he took 2 steps forward politely. The distance was well chosen. It was neither too close nor too far. Although they used to address each other differently, now Qin Wanru had grown up and had nothing to do with Qi's mansion, so they didn't address each other as before. Qin Wanru stood still and bowed to Qi Tianyu deeply. First young master of the Qi family. Where are you going in a hurry, second Miss Qin? Qi Tianyu stood still with a smile and a gentle look, just like the handsome child in her memory. He was also the kind and gentle brother Tianyu in Qin Wanru's childhood memory. However, things had changed, and they were no longer the siblings they used to be. Grandmother asked me to go out to buy something, but I don't know why first young master of the Qi family is here? Qin Wanru said lightly, with a clear but a little alienation in her eyes. Even though her hibiscus face was a little charming, this charm was contaminated with alienation and a kind of coldness that kept people thousands of miles away. Qin Wanru didn't think there was anything to talk about with Qi Tianyu. Didn't they say that they would fight to the death? Coincidentally, I'm going out too. Let's go together. Qi Tianyu suggested gently. I'm afraid I can't. I suddenly remembered that my mother asked me to visit her again before I went out. She told me to buy something. Qin Wanru smiled. Her words were very polite, but the meaning of her words was also very clear. She was not willing to go with Qi Tianyu. This excuse could be said to be simple and rude, and it was a careless reason. Since second Miss Qin has something to do, I won't bother you. Qi Tianyu didn't insist. He just smiled politely. Then he waved his robe and walked forward. Qin Wanru stopped and narrowed her eyes. She looked at Qi Tianyu's back thoughtfully. She felt there was something mysterious about it, but she couldn't figure out why. Some of the rumors about Qin Yuru were related to Qi Tianyu. It was not good for Qi Tianyu to visit her at this time. In the past, Qi Tianyu should have avoided this topic. Why didn't he do so today? Miss, is first young master of the Qi family expressing goodwill to you? Why does he think that you will forgive him if he shows goodwill to you? Yu Jie said angrily. Although she didn't see the farce with her own eyes, she had heard all kinds of rumors. She didn't like Qi Tianyu at all. When Qi Tianyu came over, she deliberately stood beside Qin Wanru and looked at Qi Tianyu unkindly. Qi Tianyu had left. Of course, Qin Wanru wouldn't go to Shui Rulin's yard on purpose. She moved slightly and continued to walk out. When you come back, ask Nanny Duan why he came here. Qi Tianyu shouldn't come at this time, and he wouldn't come. Yes, I will see Nanny Duan when I come back. Yu Jie nodded. Because Qi Tianyu was in front, Qin Wanru deliberately slowed down. She went out of Chuehua Gate to the yard where the carriage was parked. As expected, she didn't meet Qi Tianyu along the way. After getting on the carriage, it went all the way out of Qin's mansion. Instead of going directly to the address given by Chu Luchen, she went to Butterfly Clothing Shop first. When she arrived at the door of Butterfly Clothing Shop, she found that it was very prosperous with people coming and going, which was completely different from the situation of the old shop that she had bought before. The carriage stopped in the alley on the side. Qin Wanru got off the carriage with Chu Lu and Yu Jie. As soon as they entered the shop, the sharp-eyed Nanny Dong saw them. She immediately apologized to a miss who was talking, came to Qin Wanru, and led her into the shopkeeper's room inside. After asking the shopkeeper to serve tea, the shopkeeper left. Nanny Dong, business seems to be very good. Qin Wanru said with a smile. It is indeed not bad. Ever since young lady entered the palace wearing the clothes, many young ladies from aristocratic families have come to order clothes similar to young ladies. This subordinate has already prepared them long ago, but there are too many people coming, so we didn't have much stock. Now we are rushing to restock. Nanny Dong smiled with her eyes narrowed. The business was better than she had imagined. Now there are already shops on the street that have copied it, right? Qin Wanru asked. Second miss, you are right. Many shops have seen that we put a gauze coat on the outside, So they all made clothes like this. Fortunately, we have not only this way of matching clothes, but also some chic toggle and loop buttons and embroidery. So, they didn't copy all of them. Nanny Dong nodded and admired Chin Wanru more and more. Before Second Miss went out, she already knew what was going on in the world. Originally, she wanted to report these aspects to Second Miss, but she didn't expect that Second Miss had already prepared and knew it clearly. Even if there are shops that make such ready-made clothes, it doesn't matter. The brand of our shop has been publicized. From now on, we will mainly feature exquisite toggle and loop buttons and embroidery. From time to time, we need to change some different plans, and we can also sew according to Mrs. own ideas. Chin Wanru picked up the tea at hand, took a sip and said after thinking for a while. I also think so. I originally wanted to ask Second Mississippi. Since Second Miss also thinks so, I will do as you say. But there is one thing I want to discuss with you. Speaking of this, Nanny Dong hesitated. In fact, she was not sure about this matter. Although she had inquired about it in advance, she always felt that there might be something she didn't know. What's the matter? Chin Wanru raised her eyebrows slightly, and she could see that Nanny Dong was really embarrassed. Someone wants to invest in our shop. Second Miss, do you think it is appropriate? Nanny Dong's eyes were very bright, and it could be seen that she was very interested in this matter. Butterfly Clothing Shop's business was very good now. What it lacked was that Chin Wanru didn't have so much capital to invest. If there was a large capital investment, it would definitely be the greatest benefit for the whole shop. Someone? Chin Wanru asked calmly and slightly lowered her eyebrows. Who was so well informed? Chapter 336. Shop shares? The whole shop? Chin Wanru raised her eyebrows and asked in surprise. The so-called shop shares was to merge the previous shops. If it was the whole shop, then the whole shop would be merged together, and the income would also be shared with Butterfly Clothing Shop. But if it was not the whole shop, the income from the shares would still be incorporated into Butterfly Clothing Shop. This kind of thing was actually very rare. Even if it was possible to buy shares with shops, all of them were large shops with good income. Although Butterfly Clothing Shop looked very good now, its shop was not big after all, and it had just gained a foothold in the capital city. No one knew how long this shop could last. Using the original shops in the capital city to buy shares. It was too risky and almost impossible to do it. It's the whole shop, and the shop is not small. I specially went to see it and asked someone to check the account. I found that there is also a profit on the account, and the annual income is good. Madame Dong said with a smile. What shop? Chin Wanru was not so optimistic. She had an intuition that there was something wrong, so she asked immediately. Fanglan Embroidery Shop is an old shop. They heard that we have good ways of making clothes here, and there are many beautiful ways of making clothes with embroidery and toggle and loop buttons. Their shopkeeper came to discuss with me and said that their old boss wants to use Fanglan Embroidery Shop as a share to offset half of the shares. Do you think it is feasible, Second Miss? Madame Dong asked. In fact, she really felt that she had gained a big advantage, but she also felt that this advantage was too big and a little weak. Originally, she wanted to go to the Chin's mansion to report this matter to Chin Wanru these days. Since Chin Wanru came today, it saved her a lot of trouble. The whole shop of Fanglan Embroidery Shop was bigger than Butterfly Clothing Shop, and it was also one of the few old shops in the capital city. Even so, they were still willing to use this shop to offset half of the shares of Butterfly Clothing Shop. Speaking of this, Butterfly Clothing Shop had gained a big advantage. Fanglan Embroidery Shop? Chin Wanru raised her watery eyes, blinked her eyelashes twice, and looked at Madame Dong almost unbelievably. Yes, it's Fanglan Embroidery Shop. It's just 2 streets in front of us. In fact, it's not too far away. If Second Miss is interested, I can accompany you to have a look. We can sneak over and see the operation of that shop, the customers coming and going, and the ready-made clothes samples from their shop in the past. Madame Dong said and was about to stand up. This kind of thing could not be explained clearly. She had to see it with her own eyes. Madame Dong thought that it was better to take Second Miss to have a look. No need. Chin Wanru waved her hand and motioned her to sit down. Then she said slowly, You don't have to go. I know this embroidery room. I have been there before. Her watery eyes were so deep that the bottom could hardly be seen. She sneered in her heart. What a coincidence. I actually met Fanglan embroidery shop again. I was looking for this embroidery shop, but I didn't expect it to take the initiative to bump into me. What a coincidence. What a coincidence. Really? That's great, Second Mississippi. What do you think? Madame Dong said excitedly. Since Second Miss had already seen it, she must know that the shop's business was excellent. Madame Dong really hoped to expand the shop. If the two families shared shares, it would be very good for Butterfly Clothing Shop. She was new here, so she didn't know the length of the business. The current prosperity didn't mean that it would last long. With Fanglan Embroidery Shop as a guarantee, Madame Dong felt that at least the source of customers was guaranteed and there would be no shortage of funds. The business was so good, and the shop had been established in the capital city for so long. How could there be a shortage of funds? Have you found out who their boss is? Qin Wanru said softly with her watery eyes. What? They didn't say. They only said that their boss is also a powerful aristocratic family in the capital city. But before the two families officially become shareholders, they don't intend to say the name of their boss. Madame Dong said awkwardly. There were many such things in the capital city. Many aristocratic families didn't want others to know which shops belonged to them. Just like Qin Wanru's Butterfly Clothing Shop, only Madame Dong showed up. As the boss, Qin Wanru never showed up to talk business directly with others. Of course, she also told Madame Dong not to tell others about it. Find a way to find out more about their boss from their shopkeeper. Just say that it's my idea. I want to know more about their background. Otherwise, I'm afraid I can't talk about it. Qin Wanru said with a smile. Delay it first? Madame Dong understood what Qin Wanru meant and asked. Yes, delay it first and see the situation. We just arrived in the capital city, so we don't know many things. Many shops have been here for a long time. Why did this shop directly find a new shop like ours, which has just entered the capital city? With their background, it's not a problem to even buy a stake in a prosperous old shop. Qin Wanru said slowly. These words shocked Madame Dong's vision and made her feel more and more cold. Suddenly, she found that she had thought too well before. She was attracted by the bright future described by the shopkeeper of the shop, and she actually forgot many suspicious things. She shivered and broke out in a cold sweat. Second Miss, don't worry. I will do my best to find out about this shop. No matter how deeply the boss of their shop hides, I will dig it out. Thinking of it now, Madame Dong still had a lingering fear. The condition was so worrisome that even a cautious person like her was tempted. She even lobbied the Second Miss for it. If the Second Miss really agreed just now, it might really be a disaster. If one thing was suspicious, everything would be suspicious. The more Madame Dong thought about Fanglan Embroidery Shop, the more suspicious she became. Seeing that Madame Dong had understood, Qin Wanru asked about the shop's work with a smile. Then she refused Madame Dong's offer to send her out and walked out with two servant girls. She didn't want others to find out that this shop was hers. Madame Dong appeared in the shop after Qin Wanru left and walked to the miss who had been talking with her. Is the miss just now the second miss of Ningyuan Army General's mansion? The miss who had been talking with her asked curiously. Yes, the second Miss Qin ordered clothes here before, so I just came to ask, Madame Dong said with a smile. I heard that it was because the second Miss Qin wore the clothes here in the palace that the misses of aristocratic families in the capital rushed to order clothes here. I thought that the second Miss Qin was a beauty, but now it seems that she is just SOSO. The beautiful miss raised the corner of her mouth. Although her smile was gentle, her words were a little unpleasant. A trace of displeasure flashed in Madame Dong's eyes, but it was immediately hidden behind a smile. I dare not accept Miss Shu's words. Miss Shu, you'd better look at this cloth. I don't know if this pattern is worthy of your taste. As Madame Dong spoke, she pointed to a shop assistant at a piece of material placed on the top of the counter. It was beautifully packaged and placed in a box. At first glance, it looked gorgeous and bright. But if you looked closely, you would find that the color was mainly white and lotus. It was gorgeous and elegant. It was exactly the kind of thing that the young ladies in the capital city who were low-key on the surface but actually wanted to stand out liked the most. Madame Dong's eyes were very sharp. At a glance, she had already seen the characteristics of the Mrs. Dress. Miss Shu's eyes fell on the brocade and her eyes lit up. It could be seen that she liked it very much, but she pretended not to care so much. She nodded slightly and said, "Take this one. Remember to design the toggle and loop buttons and embroidery patterns according to my own design." "Yes, monsieur. Don't worry. I will do it according to your idea," Madame Dong said with a smile. Miss Shu was quite satisfied with Madame Dong's company all the way. She nodded at once, turned around and left with her servant girl. Qin Wanru did not know that someone had recognized her. At this moment, she was in the carriage. After a few turns, the carriage arrived at the door of a relatively remote courtyard. Yu Jie recognized the number on the door. It was indeed her, so she went to knock on the door. After a long while, footsteps came from inside the door, followed by a man's low voice. "Who is it?" Hearing this familiar voice, Chu Li's eyes turned red. She rushed to the door and said loudly, "Father, I'm Chu Lu. I'm here to see you." There seemed to be a moment of silence inside the door, and then there was a hurried sound of the door opening. The door opened with a hua sound. Chu Li's father stood at the door with an excited expression. But then he turned his eyes to Yu Jie, and his eyes became sharp. "Father, our second miss is in the carriage," Chu Li hurriedly explained after a salute. "Miss is here." Chu Li's father was stunned at first, and then he was overjoyed. He even had a feeling of crying with joy. He stepped aside and respectfully wiped the corners of his eyes. Yu Jie turned back to help Qin Wanru get off the carriage. They walked through the door. After everyone entered the door, Chu Li's father looked around vigilantly and closed the door. When Qin Wanru sat down in the main room, Chu Li's father had entered the door. He knelt in front of Qin Wanru with a plop sound and said, "Miss, I am the servant of the heir of Duke." Speaking of this, his voice was choked with sobs, and he could not even finish his words. Seeing her father kneeling down, Chu Lu also knelt behind him. "Get up." Qin Wanru sighed and reached out to help him up. "Miss, I finally found you. It's just that I'm stupid. I have been in Jiangzhou for so many years, but I didn't find out your real identity. I deserve to die." Chu Li's father did not get up directly, still kneeling and crying. "It's not your fault. Get up and sit down first. I have something to ask you," Qin Wanru said softly, while letting Chu Lu help her father up. Chu Lu got up and reached out to hold her father's hand to help him stand up. Qin Wanru motioned for him to sit aside, but he was unwilling to do so, so she could only let him. "How did you know my identity?" After he stood aside, Qin Wanru asked slowly, with a trace of coldness flashing at the bottom of her eyes. "Since Miss left, the news that Miss is not the biological daughter of Ningyuan army general has spread. Some conjectures about Miss's parentage have also been faintly spread from the mouths of some people. Only then did I notice Mississippi. Later, I secretly inquired about some former subordinates of Ningyuan army general and found that Miss is the one I'm looking for. You are the daughter of the heir of Duke and Infanta. When I was about to enter the capital city, you suddenly sent someone to find me. Then I followed her to the capital city and have been waiting here for you." Chu Li's father wiped his tears and said, for so many years he had not left Jiangzhou, because Jiangzhou was close to the border. It was said that most of the refugees had been transferred to Jiangzhou. He had been to many places to look for her, but he had never thought that the daughter of Ningyuan army general was the one he was looking for. Chapter 337. The people who brought Chu Li's father to the capital city were certainly not her people, but Chu Liuchen's people. "Tell me what happened at that time." Qin Wanru thought for a while and said, "Miss, when Infanta married into the mansion, she was not liked by Old Madam. Old Madam liked cousin Miss, who was brought to Duke Xing's mansion when she was a child. She was the niece of Old Madam's maiden family and was prepared to be married to Child. But Child didn't like cousin Miss, but liked Infanta Qinghua. After meeting Infanta, he knew that Old Madam would stop it, so he specially asked the emperor to decree the marriage. After that, cousin mismarried the second young master. Infanta Qinghua was a gentle person. Although she was an infanta, she still regarded herself as the daughter-in-law of Duke Xing's mansion. However, old Madam always made things difficult for Infanta and even deliberately punished Infanta to kneel down. Infanta and heir of Duke Xing's first child died in this way. Chu Li's father told her what happened at that time bit by bit. That was the part that Madam Dowager didn't know. The first child of Infanta Qinghua and the former child of Duke Xing was lost because of old Madam's difficulties. Later, old Madam Dowager said some hypocritical words, saying that she didn't know it and scolding Infanta Qinghua for being unfilial, knowing that she was pregnant but not saying it, deliberately framing her for being unkind. Child of Duke Xing was furious. After quarreling with old Madam, he wanted to leave with Infanta Qinghua, saying that he wanted to stay far away from old Madam and go to the border to be a general. At that time, old Duke Xing didn't allow him to leave, and they also had a dispute. Old Duke Xing was so angry that he drove the former child of Duke Xing out of the mansion and said that child of Duke Xing was not allowed to say his identity in front of others in the future. They thought that child of Duke Xing showed weakness and returned to the mansion again. Unexpectedly, child of Duke Xing was so fierce that he left with Infanta Qinghua without saying goodbye and went directly to the border. He only left a letter saying that he would go to the border to hide his identity and exile in the army. He only said that he could also make a name and protect his wife without relying on Duke Xing's mansion. Heir of Duke Xing left too suddenly. When old Duke Xing and Ruian Great Elder Princess realized it, heir of Duke Xing and Infanta Qinghua had already disappeared. After that, no matter how hard the two mansions searched, they could not find them. However, the two mansions did not give up and still sent many people to the border, trying to find heir of Duke Xing and Infanta Qinghua. A few years had passed, and all the people he had searched for had returned, but there was still no news of their whereabouts. At this time, the rebellion broke out, and the border was in a state of emergency. Many cities were destroyed, and even the people in the capital city were in a panic. At this time, in Great Elder Princess's mansion received a letter from Infanta Qinghua, saying that heir of Duke Xing and Infanta Qinghua had a daughter, and now she was pregnant. In the chaos of war, Infanta Qinghua was not safe at the border, so heir of Duke Xing wanted her to go back to the capital city first and let someone from in Great Elder Princess's mansion pick her up. Upon receiving this news, and Great Elder Princess burst into tears of joy. Although she was unwilling to pay attention to Duke Xing's mansion, seeing that Duke Xing's mansion had not forgotten to look for them, she leaked the news to Duke Xing's mansion. The two mansions sent people to pick up Infanta Qinghua together. Among the people sent by Duke Xing's mansion at that time, Chu Li's father was among them. The old Duke Xing's mansion specially called him over before he left the capital city and repeatedly told him that after finding heir of Duke Xing, he should follow heir of Duke Xing and protect him. When Infanta Qinghua returned to the capital city first, there would be other people from and Great Elder Princess's mansion and Duke Xing's mansion to protect her. However, this group of people only found Infanta Qinghua in the end. At that time, Infanta Qinghua was hiding behind a small broken Buddha statue. Several servant girls around her were all killed by the chaotic army. Only she sat behind the Buddha statue in bloody clothes and was in a daze. When they called her, she did not respond. She only murmured the name of heir of Duke Xing and another vague word. Everyone looked for heir of Duke Xing around but could not find him. However, seeing that Infanta Qinghua was not in a good condition, most people protected Infanta Qinghua to return to the capital city. Only Chu Li's father and several other people continued to look for heir of Duke Xing, as well as Infanta Qinghua and heir of Duke Xing's eldest daughter. However, they could not find heir of Duke Xing, and the people sent out returned to the capital city one after another. Only Chu Li's father did not give up and continued to look for heir of Duke Xing for so many years. The old Duke Xing died, and the new Duke Xing was the original second young master of Duke Xing's mansion. Now seeing Qin Wanru, how could Chu Li's father not be excited? The belief that supported him for so many years was to find heir of Duke Xing and his daughter. Miss, you are the miss of our Duke Xing's mansion. You are the most distinguished miss in Duke Xing's mansion. Even a man could not help crying. Thinking that his long-cherished wish had finally come true, Chu Li's father could not help crying again. He walked to the door and knelt down to the west. He lowered his head and muttered to himself, piously comforting his master. Qin Wanru bit her lips and clenched her hands tightly, with endless malice hidden in her eyes. In her last life, she did not burn an incense stick for her biological parents. Qin Yuru probably showed her filial piety in front of her parents' memorial tablets many times. If her parents knew it in the afterlife, they would definitely be sad to see her being pushed into a dead end step by step. Madame D, Qin Yuru, Madame of Duke Xing, and even the old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion should know something. She bit her lips hard, and the sharp sting made her clearly realize what she should do now. Duke Xing's mansion, Madame of Duke Xing, and old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion, she would get back everything. Miss, now you know everything. Go back to Duke Xing's mansion with me. Old Madame will be very happy. After Chu Li's father finished murmuring, he got up and walked to Qin Wanru's side, saying with red eyes. In his opinion, it was a great thing for Duke Xing's mansion to find Qin Wanru. Now the cause and effect had been clear. They only needed Qin Wanru to recognize her ancestors and return to the clan, which was also the wish of his old master. She won't be happy. She has found another granddaughter. Qin Wanru said lightly. Her words shocked Chu Li's father. He looked at Qin Wanru in astonishment and said, How could it be possible? Miss is the daughter of master. How could there be another? Because the news was so shocking for him that he could not even say a word, he stammered. Yes, my big sister. Old Madame and Madame of Duke Xing both think my big sister is her granddaughter. Qin Wanru said calmly, without a ripple in her eyes, as if she was talking about someone else's business. First Miss Qin, how could it be possible? First Miss Qin is the daughter of Madame D, the biological daughter of Ningyuan Army General. How could she become the miss of Duke Xing's mansion? Chu Li's father said in horror. He had been in Jiangzhou for a long time, so he certainly knew Qin Yuru. Moreover, when he knew there were doubts about Qin Wanru's identity, he specially went to Ningyuan Army General's mansion to investigate Qin Yuru's background. She lowered her age by 2 years and took out an old bluegrass seal of Infanta Qinghua. In addition, Madame D didn't like her and even beat her until there were bruises on her body for everyone to see. Old Madame felt that there was time and evidence, so she naturally wanted to recognize her. Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows and her eyes were cold. How could this be? This is wrong. It is impossible. Chu Li's father was so anxious when he heard that old Madame was going to recognize Qin Yuru. After pacing for 2 times, he suddenly stood still and said to Qin Wanru with a firm face, Miss, don't worry. I will go to Duke Xing's mansion and report to old Madame about you. I will definitely let old Madame acknowledge you to the world. Announce it to the world? Qin Wanru's long eyelashes fluttered twice, and there was a cold, sharp light in her eyes. She sneered in her heart. In the last life, even if old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion recognized Qin Yuru as her granddaughter, she did not announce it to the world. She just showed her love for Qin Yuru. Duke Xing's mansion would not let the descendants of the deceased heir of Duke Xing's mansion become strong. It was good enough to give the identity of an unknown adopted daughter, and then show their favor. This was all the compensation of Duke Xing's mansion. Of course, this compensation had to be given to Qin Yuru, who was not Duke Xing's mansion. Otherwise, they would not be able to get past Madame of Duke Xing. Now she was 100% sure that Madame D and Qin Yuru wanted to pretend to be her. Although it was Madame D and Qin Yuru's idea, it must be part of Madame of Duke Xing's plan. Fortunately, she had no expectations for Duke Xing's mansion at all. Old Madame and Madame of Duke Xing now believe in Qin Yuru and Madame D. It is useless for you to say anything. Moreover, do you really think they will like me? Qin Wanru said slowly. This question made Chu Li's father speechless for a moment. Old Madame did not like Infanta Qinghua. If she did not take Infanta Qinghua's identity into consideration, she would have thought of a way to divorce Infanta Qinghua and let cousin Miss marry the heir of Duke Xing. Later cousin Miss married the second young master. It seemed that she also respected Infanta Qinghua. But in fact, he had seen several times that after Cousin Miss said something to old Madam tortured Infanta Qinghua desperately. At that time, Infanta Qinghua had a miscarriage and lost her child. It was old Madam who forced Infanta Qinghua to kneel. The reason was related to Cousin Mississippi. After this, Cousin Miss even specially knelt in front of the door of the heir of Duke Xing's courtyard to apologize to Infanta Qinghua. She said that she apologized to Infanta Qinghua on behalf of old Madam. With old Madam's identity, even if she was really wrong, it was impossible for her sister-in-law, to kneel in front of the courtyard. Chu Li's father was the servant of heir of Duke Xing at that time. He had been following heir of Duke Xing all the time. It was at that time that he saw heir of Duke Xing, who had always been gentle, kick Miss Chu, coldly ask her to get out and say that he did not want to see her anymore. At that time, Cousin Miss Chu burst into tears and couldn't help expressing her feelings to heir of Duke Xing. At that time, Chu Li's father knew that Cousin Miss Qinghua had never forgotten heir of Duke Xing. Now Cousin Miss Qinghua was Madam of Duke Xing. Would she really recognize the child born by Infanta Qinghua? He would never forget Cousin Miss Qinghua's vicious curse at that time. Her beautiful face was as ferocious as a devil. Chapter 338. Hearing that Qin Wanru came, Ru and Great Elder Princess specially asked Nanny Gao to pick her up. After arriving inside, Qin Wanru respectfully bowed to Ru and Great Elder Princess. Then she stepped aside, pointed to the person behind her, and said to Ru and Great Elder Princess, "Great Elder Princess, do you know this person?" And Great Elder Princess raised her eyes and looked at the middle-aged man in front of her. She frowned. After so many years, she couldn't recognize him for a while. After looking him up and down for a few times, she shook her head. Nanny Gao on the side became excited and couldn't help asking in a trembling voice, Are you Xiao Huai?" Yes, I am Xiao Huai." "Nanny Gao, you still recognize me." Xiao Huai, Chu Li's father, knelt in front of Ru and Great Elder Princess and said to Nanny Gao excitedly, "Xiao Huai." And Great Elder Princess evaluated this reputation, and suddenly her face changed. She suddenly stood up, walked to Xiao Huai in a few steps, and looked at his face carefully. Are you the Xiao Huai who follows your heir?" "Yes, Princess, I am. I am Xiao Huai. I have been looking for our heir for so many years and have never given up." Xiao Huai burst into tears. He had wandered for so many years and thought about finding the heir back every day, because he had a belief in his heart. Now that he knew that the heir had really passed away, how could he not be sad? He was the servant of heir of Duke Xing, and he had served heir of Duke Xing since he was a child. He had always been loyal to heir of Duke Xing, which was also an important reason why the old Duke Xing sent him to find him. "Have you found him?" And Great Elder Princess held back the tears in her eyes, said in a trembling voice, and looked at him expectantly. "Great Elder Princess, I didn't find the heir. The heir has passed away a long time ago. Yes, after that rebellion." Xiao Huai started sobbing as he wiped his tears. When Great Elder Princess shook and almost fell down, Nanny Gao hurriedly reached out to help her and said in a choked voice, Princess, don't be too sad." This is what I guessed at the beginning. In fact, there had been no news for so many years, so everyone basically thought that the former heir of Duke Xing could not survive. But it was just a guess. Getting such accurate news still made Ruan Great Elder Princess feel like she had been hit hard. When she was young, she lost her husband. When she was middle-aged, she lost her only daughter. Now she only had Hao, who was forcibly taken from Duke Xing's mansion. Thinking of what Hao said that day, if his father was still in Duke Xing's mansion, how could such a thing happen? The old woman of Duke Xing's mansion had gone too far. She even wanted to kill Hao's only hope. She really thought that there was no one else in the eldest branch of Duke Xing's mansion. "Princess, I found the little miss." Seeing Ri and Great Elder Princess so sad, Xiao Huai hurriedly said, Miss?" Ri and Great Elder Princess pulled herself together and struggled to stand firm. Then she asked eagerly, "Where?" For so many years, Ri and Great Elder Princess had been sending people. She always felt that maybe the girl was still alive, at least the girl was still alive. Great Elder Princess, this is the miss left by the former heir of Duke Xing's mansion. She was adopted by Ningyuan army general until now. Xiao Huai turned to look at Qin Wanru and said, "Second Miss Qin?" And Great Elder Princess pulled herself together and her eyes became sharp. Nanny Gao helped her to sit down. "Come here." And Great Elder Princess waved to Qin Wanru and said. Qin Wanru nodded and walked over slowly. When she came to and Great Elder Princess, she was about to salute, but she was stopped by Great Elder Princess. A pair of sharp eyes looked up and down Qin Wanru, and suddenly her eyes turned red. "Princess, this pair of eyes is really like Infanta's." Nanny Gao shed tears and looked at Qin Wanru. "What the hell is going on?" Great Elder Princess asked, and her eyes trembled slightly, with expectation and sadness. "Great Elder Princess, this is mine. It is said that my mother took me away first, but we were separated by the rebel army and my mother disappeared. My father found me and entrusted me to old Madame Qin. At that time, there was such a seal hanging on my neck." Qin Wanru took a small box from Yuji's hand and opened it. There was a bluegrass seal inside. This is horse." Seeing this familiar seal, and Great Elder Princess couldn't help crying. She stretched out her trembling hands. At this time, she was not the high and mighty Great Elder Princess, but a mother who had lost her biological daughter. Qin Wanru put the small box in the hands of and Great Elder Princess, and her eyes turned red. She bit her lips, suppressed the sadness in her heart, and forced a smile. "Great Elder Princess, look at it." Great Elder Princess held the seal in her hand and looked at it from top to bottom. The more she looked at it, the more tears came out and blurred her sight. How could she not know this seal? This was her daughter's seal, and it was the seal carved by her late husband. Her daughter cherished it very much and always took it with her. If someone wanted to leave a mark in writing or painting, he would definitely use this seal to leave a mark on it. "Great Elder Princess, this is really Infanta Qinghua's seal. Look, here, this was accidentally dropped by Infanta when she was young, and a small corner is missing." Nanny Gao was also sad when she said this. She cried and pointed to a small gap. Qin Wanru looked at it with blinking eyes. There was indeed a small gap on the corner of the seal. She had seen it before, but she didn't care about it. Unexpectedly, it was dropped by her biological mother when she was young. "This is Qinghua's seal. Is there anything else?" And Great Elder Princess raised her head and looked at Qin Wanru expectantly. "There is a Fenghua glazed cup." Qin Wanru thought for a moment and bit her lips. "Where is it? Come on, show it to me." And Great Elder Princess got excited and said hurriedly, "Fenghua glazed cup is in the hands of Prince Qin. When I was in Jiangzhou, Prince Qin said that he wanted to find Fenghua glazed cup. He said that he heard that there was one in our mansion, and then it fell into the hands of Prince Qin." Qin Wanru said vaguely, "Go, send someone to Prince Qin's mansion and bring the Fenghua glazed cup here." And Great Elder Princess was so excited that she reached out to hold Qin Wanru and ordered Nanny Gao. "Okay, Princess, I will send someone to Prince Qin's mansion right now," Nanny Gao said and was about to leave. But she was stopped by Qin Wanru. "Great Elder Princess, Prince Qin is in the palace now. I am afraid that he is not in the mansion. Even if you send someone there, it is impossible to find him." This reminded and Great Elder Princess. She wiped her tears and nodded. She asked Nanny Gao to go to Chu Luchin to get it in a few days. At this point, and Great Elder Princess had believed that Qin Wanru was her granddaughter. Since she said that the glazed cup was in the hands of Chu Luchin, it must be there. Chu Luchin was not the kind of person who could be deceived. If she talked nonsense, not only she would not forgive her, but also she would not be able to get through with Chu Luchin. "Wanru, you have suffered. Come on, let Grandma see it, let Grandma see it clearly." And Great Elder Princess looked at Qin Wanru's beautiful eyes and suddenly couldn't control her tears. She hugged Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru also couldn't control her tears at this time. She finally found her family in 2 lives. This feeling of being loved, even if she had known it for a long time, she couldn't help crying. The two of them almost cried in each other's arms. Nanny Gao and Xiao Huai hurriedly persuaded them on the side. It took them a lot of effort to persuade them to stop crying. After sitting down again, Qin Wanru sat next to Ru, and great elder princess. Her hands were tightly held by Ru, and great elder princess. Seeing the tears on Qin Wanru's childish face, Ru, and great elder princess, who had always been strong, wanted to cry again. Her granddaughter was not only the miss of Duke Xing's mansion, but also the blood of the royal family. However, she wandered to Jiangzhou and even became someone's daughter. She had also paid attention to Qin Wanru before and knew that she was not the daughter of Madame D. The vicious Madame D even wanted to hurt her secretly. She even sent someone to kill Qin Wanru in Jingxin Monastery, preparing to drug her and buy her. At that time, when she heard this, Ru, and great elder princess wanted to stand up for Qin Wanru, but was stopped by Nanny Gao, saying that it was not legitimate. Although Ru, and great elder princess was noble, she couldn't meddle in other people's business. It was unreasonable for her to meddle in this matter. Now thinking about it, Qin Wanru was her biological granddaughter. And great elder princess was so distressed that she almost wanted to slap Madame D fiercely. Great elder princess. Qin Wanru bit her lips, wiped away her tears and said, "Miss, why do you still call her great elder princess? She is your biological grandmother. The princess has been looking forward to your news. For so many years, she has never given up looking for you." Nanny Gao interrupted her with a smile and reminded her. And great elder princess looked at her with expectation. "Grandma," Qin Wanru whispered. When she called out, there was a huge wave in her heart, and she couldn't help crying again. And great elder princess was the same. The word grandma made her cry again because of distress. After a long time, the two of them stopped. "Wanru, after you recognize your ancestors and return to your family, don't live in Duke Xing's mansion. Since the old woman doesn't like you and how, you can live here with me. In the future, don't use the surname Xiao, and follow my surname. The surname Chu belongs to the royal family. I want to see how they bully you." And great elder princess wiped away her tears and said angrily, "Old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion made trouble for her daughter and son-in-law. She doted on her niece so much and ordered Qinghua as a servant girl. She didn't know Qinghua's identity and that woman's identity." Every time she thought of this, Ru, and great elder princess felt distressed. Her daughter, who was raised in the palm of her hand, was humiliated like this, and finally had to flee far away. The tragedy of the whole family was caused by that hateful old woman. "Grandma, you can call me Zhuozhuo. Grandma always calls me that," Qin Wanru said softly. Chapter 339. What did you say?" And great elder princess said anxiously. Grandma always calls me by my nickname Zhuozhuo." Qin Wanru didn't know why Ru, and great elder princess suddenly became so shocked and hurriedly pulled her wet sleeves. Zhuozhuo. It turns out to be Zhuozhuo. Qinghua has already told me. I am stupid." And great elder princess beat her chest and stamped her feet and cried. "Grandma, don't cry. What is going on?" Qin Wanru saw that she couldn't persuade her for a while and turned to look at Nanny Gao. Nanny Gao was also wiping her tears with a handkerchief. Hearing Dong Wanru's question, she wiped her tears and said, "When the Infanta was rescued, she kept repeating the name of the heir of heir and your nickname. But everyone didn't know what Infanta was saying and thought it was just a spoken word. No one thought it was actually the nickname of Little Miss." Nanny Gao thought of how great elder princess almost collapsed when she first saw Infanta Qinghua's silly look. How could she continue? It turned out that her mother had already told her her name. Grandma said that she didn't have a real name and only had a temporary nickname. It should be that her parents wanted to ask the elders of the family to give her a name after returning to the capital city. The nickname Zhuozhuo was given by her biological parents. In the whole Qin's mansion, only Grandma called her that. It should be that Grandma was used to calling her like this when she heard her father and mother call her that. There was a cause and effect. It turned out that everything had been very clear. It was just that in the last life, Qin Yuru took her place and became the daughter of the lineal descent of Duke Xing's mansion by accident. But maybe it was true that Qin Yuru didn't get the approval of Ru, great elder princess after all. So when she died, Ru, great elder princess didn't recognize her and didn't like her at all. Zhuozhua, get up and go with me to see old madam of Duke Xing's mansion. I will let her see you and let you restore your identity, and then bring you back. Great elder princess didn't cry for a long time this time. After wiping away her tears, she pulled Qin Wanru up with a stern face and was about to go to Duke Xing's mansion. Princess, calm down first. If you go like this, people will definitely say that you bully others by force, which is not good for little Miss' reputation. Seeing great elder princess's aggressive look, Nanny Gao knew it was not good, so she hurriedly persuaded her. So what if I'm bullying you? Could it be that my granddaughter is going to be bullied by them? As for reputation, her eldest granddaughter has such a good reputation. Is she really a good person? One look and I can tell that they are the same as her and her niece. They look gentle on the surface but are actually vicious. Thinking of the tragic experience of her daughter's family, Ruan great elder princess pointed in the direction of Duke Xing's mansion and scolded loudly. She was so angry that she had forgotten that she had raised the first Miss Xiao in the mansion for a period of time because she thought she was a good girl when she was young. Grandma, please sit down. I have something to tell you. Qin Wanru pulled Ru, great elder princess's hand and said, feeling very happy. Madam of Duke Xing and her eldest daughter, Xiao Yenru, who had always been the model of misses from aristocratic families in the capital, were such people. In the last life, she was killed by Xiao Yenru. It should be Xiao Yenru who knew her identity, so she killed her and cut her in half at the waist. Grandma, Duke Xing's mansion has identified Qin Yuru as the person they are looking for. There should be an agreement between Madame D and someone in Duke Xing's mansion. Madame D asked Qin Yuru to pretend to be me and reduce her age by 2 years. They also said that Madame D beat her and didn't seem to be her biological mother. There should also be a seal later. Qin Wanru said with cold eyes. In the last life, the seal in her hand fell into the hands of Madame D and Qin Yuru, which must be evidence for Qin Yuru to take her identity. In this life, although she took the seal back early, she was sure that Madame D had already thought of this matter. She knew it from the tone when she embroidered the orchid pattern on Qin Yuru's clothes to inquire about Duke Xing's mansion. Knowing the pattern, it was very easy to make another seal. Qin Wanru guessed that Qin Yuru must have such an old seal in her hand, and it must also be engraved with the orchid pattern. However, this pattern was in her memory, so it might be a little difficult to make it exactly the same. Of course, if someone in Duke Xing's mansion could help her find her mother's old calligraphy and paintings, she might be able to make an identical seal. She wanted to see the seal in Qin Yuru's hand to verify something. Rebel. How could such a thing happen? Needless to say, it must be the old woman in Duke Xing's mansion and the current madam of Duke Xing. When my son was alive, they tried every means to make things difficult for my son. They said that she was dignified and decent, but it was obviously fake. Qingzi was kind. If she had listened to me, she would have directly beaten her out of the mansion, and there would have been no trouble. Hearing that there was such a thing, great elder princess raised her eyebrows and said angrily, I don't recognize it. Let's see if Duke Xing's mansion dares to recognize this woman. Your Highness, First Miss Qin and Madam of Ningyuan Army General treat Little Miss very badly. When I was in Jiangzhou, I heard something. I heard that First Miss Qin pushed her marriage to Little Miss in order to claim kinship with Duke Yong's mansion in the capital city, and almost ruined Little Miss's reputation. Later, she even tried to kill Little Miss several times. Xiao Huai also said angrily. When he was in Jiangzhou, he heard a lot of things, but at that time, he just heard it as someone else's matter. Although he sympathized with Second Miss Qin, he thought it had nothing to do with him, so he just heard it. Now thinking of it, he became angrier. Madame D, Duke Yong's mansion, and Duke Xing's mansion, I will not let them go. Zhuozhua, Grandma will go to avenge you now. Hearing Xiao Huai's past, Ru, and great elder princess was furious. She stood up and told Nanny Gao, Prepare my clothes. I want to go to the palace to see Empress Dowager. Grandma, where are you going? Qin Wanru reacted quickly. She stood up and grabbed Ru and Great Elder Princess's clothes. I am going to see Empress Dowager and ask her to judge for you and clarify your name. Ru and Great Elder Princess said angrily. Grandma, don't go first. I want to check the things about my father and mother. Qin Wanru gritted her teeth and said, If you go now, I am afraid I can't find anything. A trace of hostility flashed in her watery eyes. Now the things about Madame D and Qin Yuru were related to Madame of Duke Xing. Even if Madame of Duke Xing hid it well, she would catch a handful of her fox hair. When Qin Wanru came back from Ru and Great Elder Princess's mansion, she brought back Ru and Great Elder Princess's gifts. When she got off the carriage and returned to the yard, she asked the servant girls to divide the gifts into several portions and send them to various places. The Spring Festival was coming soon. These gifts were sent in the form of New Year's gift. One for Madame Dowager, one for Shui Rulin, one for Qin Wanru, and one for Qin Yuru. Madame D's gift was returned by Qin Huayong. He sent someone to tell Qin Wanru bluntly that there was no need to send gifts to Yulan Pavilion in the future. Qin Wanru naturally understood the meaning of it. She knew that this was also a compensation from her father. Qin Huayong was very partial to Qin Yuru before. She calmly took back the gifts and asked Qin Yu to put them away. This was originally just an attitude. Of course, she wanted to test not only Qin Huayong's attitude, but also Madame D's. Miss, since you didn't intend to send gifts to Madame D, why did you send them? And you even sent them to Madame D's door? Qin Yu asked confusedly as she packed up. The gifts were sent to Yulan Pavilion by a little servant girl, but they were not sent directly into Yulan Pavilion. Instead, they stopped at the door of Yulan Pavilion. Then Yu Jie was sent to the study to ask Qin Huayong's opinion. Qin Huayong immediately sent someone to say that there was no need to send gifts. Yu Jie then turned to the door of Yulan Pavilion and told the little servant girl waiting there to go back. The general said that there was no need to send gifts here in the future. So the little servant girl returned along the original way under the stunned gaze of the two rough old maids. It was said that at that time, not only the two old maids guarding the door of the courtyard, but also several servants in the courtyard saw this scene. The gifts were about to be sent into the courtyard, but they went back along the original way. This could already make Madame D very angry. In addition, Qin Yuru had smashed the blood jade bracelet given by old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion and made a scene in the street. Madame D probably couldn't bear it anymore. Miss, of course, wants to make Madame D angry. Qin Yu, you didn't see that at that time, the two new servant girls were also standing not far from the door of the courtyard with Qin Shui. They just watched us leave. Thinking of the previous scene, Yu Jie chuckled and felt very relieved. Did you see Nanny Zhou? Qin Yu also became interested and asked with a smile. I didn't see her. She should be accompanying Madame D in the room. I guess they should also know it. When I was about to leave, I heard the sound of something breaking in the room. Could it be that the teacups were smashed again? Yu Jie thought for a while and said. The two servant girls packed up the gifts while laughing, and they were in a very good mood. Now the identity of their miss was clear. After they recognized their miss and returned to the family, they would no longer be annoyed by Madame D and First Mississippi. As long as they thought of this, their confidants were very happy. Qin Wanru smiled slightly, picked up the teacup on the table, and took a sip. Her red lips curved. Blood jade bracelets? Among the gifts she gave Qin Yuru just now, there was a pair of blood jade bracelets, which she asked her maternal grandma for. She specially gave Qin Yuru. Although it was not as good as the pair of bracelets given by old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion, it was also a fine one, and it looked very similar. How about the old maid in the kitchen? Qin Wanru put down the teacup in her hand and asked with a cold smile in her eyes. She is very quiet and seems to be very honest. I heard that second miss doesn't like too strong taste, so she kept apologizing and said that she would make better food. Miss, look, this is the pastries made by this old maid before. It tastes very fragrant. I have tasted one before, and it is really delicious. Qin Yu put down the gifts in her hand, turned to go out of the room, and took out a pastry from the food basket placed on the side. Chapter 340. The pastry was made in the shape of plum blossoms, which was very suitable for the winter scene. Although it was not a big piece, it was very delicate. There was a petal on it, which was very beautiful. The fragrance came with a little fragrance of plum blossoms. I just brought it back. I was afraid that it would be cold, so I specially sealed it in the food basket. It is still hot now. Miss, please have a taste and see if you like it. Qin Yu said with a smile, holding a piece with a clean handkerchief and handing it to Qin Wanru. Do you make a lot of this kind of pastry? Qin Wanru took it, turned her fingers, and looked at the pastry in front of her carefully. She had only seen such exquisite pastry in the palace before, but it was not something that ordinary people could eat. Not many. Originally, they made 4 pieces, and each piece was 3 pieces. When I went there, I saw the old maid distributing the pastry. They said that one was for old grandma, one was for first miss, one was for miss, and one was for the general. She avoided Shui Ruolin, who was now secretly pregnant. The pastry she ate was basically made in her own small kitchen. The people in the big kitchen all knew that, so they dared not to send food to Shui Ruolin casually. She is thoughtful. What did she say at that time? Qin Wanru asked again. She didn't say anything. She just told the people around her that she didn't dare to send these to Madame Shui. She just gave these to other masters to taste. If they were good, she would make more next time. If not, she would change them to other styles. She said that her ancestor ran a pastry shop outside, and it was a good business. Qin Yu thought for a while and said that this old maid was a very smart person. Although she didn't ask why she didn't send it to Madame Shui, she had explained it clearly when she talked to herself. Then why didn't she continue to open a pastry shop? Qin Wanru asked curiously. She put it in front of her nose and smelled it. She couldn't help but take a bite. The pastry was not only beautiful, but also very fragrant and sweet, which was very popular. I also asked why. The old maid said that something happened to her family, so she had to come out to work, and the shop was also closed. Qin Yu replied. Qin Wanru thought of something and asked, is her family still running the shop? No, because this matter can't continue. Qin Yu shook her head and said, I went to check it out later. It was indeed the original shop, and it was doing well. But it suddenly closed down. I don't know the reason. When did you close it? It has been a while, not recently. Qin Yu knew what Qin Wanru was suspecting and said. In other words, he had already entered the manor. Qin Wanru nodded and stopped talking. Her eyes fell on the pastry in her hand again. The pastry was really fragrant and delicious. She turned over the unfinished pastry in her hand and her eyes fell on an inconspicuous corner. A sharp dark light suddenly flashed in her eyes. She placed the pastry in her hand on the plate and flipped the other 2 pieces over. 3 similar dark lines appeared in front of her eyes. What is this? Qin Wanru pointed at a dark pattern on the pastry and asked. This should be the mark on the mold in the hands of the old maid? Qin Yu originally thought it was just a petal and didn't care about it. Now she took a closer look and found it was like a small butterfly, very delicate and small. It fell in the dark pattern of the pastry and was almost invisible. Is it the mold brought by the old maid herself? Qin Wanru's face changed slightly and asked. This shouldn't be. When the old maid came, she didn't have anything. It is impossible for her to bring the mold in. It should be from the manor. Qin Yu didn't think so. Hearing what they said, Yu Jia also came over and carefully looked at the butterfly pattern on the pastry. It was said to be a small butterfly, but at first glance, it was at most a faint butterfly pattern. Such a delicate mold. Yu Jia couldn't help praising. When I was in Jingxin Monastery, some rich families in the south of the Yangtze River would come to make some pastry and distribute it. But it is the first time for me to see such a delicate pastry. If I don't look carefully, I really can't see the butterfly pattern. There were many rich families in the south of the Yangtze River, and Jingxin Monastery was very famous in Jiangzhou. In addition, the master of Jingxin Monastery could cure diseases. In the past, Jingxin Monastery was very popular. When Yujie was in Jingxin Monastery, she had seen different kinds of pastries, but she had never seen this kind of pastry. Qin Wenru was silent for a while, picked up the handkerchief and wiped her hands twice. Have those pastries been sent out? When I took them and was about to leave, the general's servant ran over. Seeing these very beautiful pastries, he immediately asked for one more and said that the general had a guest. Later, the old maid also gave the first Mrs. Pastry to the general, Qin Yu answered. There were only 3 pieces of pastries, and each piece was not big, so it was indeed a little small. If there were guests, these 2 pots of pastries would look like it. Who came from father's place? It said that he came from Duke Xing's mansion and is now in the mansion, Qin Yu reported. Qin Wenru was silent for a while. Duke Xing's mansion came so fast. By the way, it seems to be about the first miss. Qin Yu suddenly seemed to think of something and hurriedly added. Is the second miss here? When Qin Wenru was about to ask in detail, an old maid's voice suddenly came from outside the room and interrupted Qin Yu's words. Qin Yu looked at Qin Wenru and saw Qin Wenru nodding, turned around and lifted the curtain to go out. What's the matter? The general invited the second miss to go over, the old maid said with a smile. What's the matter? Qin Yu said in astonishment. Isn't there a guest now? Has he left? It doesn't matter if the guest is a supervisor old maid of old madam of Duke Xing's mansion. He came to see the first miss, but this matter has something to do with the first miss and the second Mississippi. Now he invited the first miss and the second miss to go over and ask about what happened yesterday. The old maid answered with a smile. The old maid of old madam of Duke Xing's mansion deliberately sent someone to ask about this matter. It seemed that the old maid of old madam of Duke Xing's mansion came with evil intentions. However, this was also good. The more anxious they were, the easier it was to mess up a pool of spring water. Qin Wenru pulled the corner of her skirt and stood up. Yujie hurriedly lifted the curtain for her. Qin Wenru walked out slowly. Has the big sister gone over? Yes, she has gone over now and is talking with Nanny Yu. The old maid answered with a smile. The first miss was just locked up yesterday and the general released her today. It seemed that the first miss might not be locked up anymore. Qin Wenru nodded and no longer said anything. She walked out with the old maid. When she arrived at the gate of the courtyard of Qin Huayong's study, she saw 2 servant girls of Duke Xing's mansion standing in the corridor with Qin Huayong's servant. Second miss, you are finally here. I have seen you several times just now, but I haven't seen you. The general has been waiting anxiously. As soon as the servant saw Qin Wenru, he hurriedly came forward to salute and stretched out his hand to lead the way. The old maid who led the way stepped back. Qin Wenru followed the servant into the room. As soon as she entered the room, she found that the originally noisy room immediately became quiet. Everyone's eyes fell on Qin Wenru. Qin Yuru's face was proud. She curled her lips and raised her head high, looking at her sarcastically with a bit of hatred flashing in her eyes. How could she not be proud? Thinking that she almost died of anger yesterday and had to be locked up by her father, today her father specially asked someone to bring her here, which meant that she didn't need to be supervised. Moreover, it was Nanny Yu of Duke Xing's mansion who came here. She didn't believe that Qin Wenru dared to say anything. Her mother was right. From now on, she and Qin Wenru were worlds apart. She was superior and Qin Wenru would be trampled by her forever. What Nanny Zhou secretly said to her last night still rang in her ears. Originally, she was still dubious, but she didn't expect that it immediately corresponded today. Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion just took action once, and her father had to release her. When she lived in Duke Xing's mansion one day, she would definitely ask Old Madam to pressure her father to release her mother and divorce Shui Rulin. As for Qin Wenru, she could just marry a beggar on the roadside. Anyway, she was originally picked up. Marrying a beggar could be said to be a good marriage. If she was unwilling, she could be sent directly to the brothel with drugs, so that she would be filthy for the rest of her life. Qin Huayong's face was as calm as water, and he seemed to be expressionless. But when looking closely, there were some fluctuations when he saw Qin Wenru. The one with the strongest reaction was actually Nanny Yu, who no one expected. The moment she saw Qin Wenru, The cup in her hand fell to the ground and smashed into pieces. She looked at Qin Wanru in astonishment, who just stepped in. Seeing Nanny Yu's shocked face, Qin Wanru was extremely calm. When she saw Nanny Yu in Duke Xing's mansion, she had already imagined today's scene. "Father!" She stepped forward and bowed to Qin Huaiyong, and then bowed sideways to Qin Yuru. "Sit down first." Qin Huaiyong waved his hand and motioned her to sit down beside Qin Yuru. Then he looked at Nanny Yu, who had not recovered from the shock, and said, "Nanny Yu, is there anything wrong with Wanru?" Second sister must have scared Nanny Yu. "I heard that Nanny Yu worshipped Buddha with old madam, and is very Buddhist-like. You like people with good temperament." Qin Yuru covered her face with a handkerchief and said with a charming smile. Her words meant to satirize that Qin Wanru was not a good person at first glance. "Yuru, shut up." Qin Huaiyong's face darkened, and he shouted harshly, "That is your sister." "My sister? Of course it is my sister. If it were not my sister, she would not have been jealous yesterday and smashed my bracelet. Father, please be a judge." Qin Yuru said with a smile, and did not hide her sarcasm in her eyes. If it was in the past, she certainly did not dare to contradict Qin Huaiyong, but now it was different. She now had the support of old madam of Duke Xing's mansion, so she was not so afraid to see her father. "Yuru, well, your jade bracelet is fine." Qin Huaiyong's face darkened more and more. His words reminded Qin Yuru. She shook the pair of blood-red bracelets in her hands, immediately changed the topic, and said flatteringly, "The pair that was smashed before was given to me by my mother. Of course, this pair can't be smashed. It was specially given to me by old madam. If Nanny Yu did not come today, I would not wear it." When Nanny Yu came just now, Qin Yuru deliberately put on the pair of blood jade bracelets given by Ru, and great elder princess. Qin Huaiyong had the same idea as her. He did not want the people of Duke Xing's mansion to know that the pair of blood jade bracelets was broken. Seeing her wearing the blood jade bracelets, he said that the pair that was smashed in the street was the pair that Madame D gave to Qin Yuru before. Chapter 341. Our miss has learned some medical skills when she was in Jiangzhou. Yujie answered for Qin Wanru. "Second miss, have you treated an old madam after you arrived in the capital city?" Nanny Yu couldn't help taking 2 steps forward to see Qin Wanru more clearly. "I have treated her once in an alley." "Is she your master?" Qin Wanru smiled slightly and admitted generously. The smile on Qin Yuru's face froze. When did Qin Wanru save old madam of Duke Xing's mansion? Why didn't she know? Qin Huaiyong frowned without batting an eyelid. "It turns out to be you." Qin's mansion, it turns out to be Ningyuan Army General's Qin's mansion. "No wonder I couldn't find you. It's Second Mississippi. Thanks to Second Miss that day, our old madam was safe and almost—" Nanny Yu was so moved that she made a deep bow to Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru hurriedly stood up to avoid it and reached out to help Nanny Yu slightly. "Nanny Yu, you are too polite." "How is it polite?" "Thank you, Second Mississippi. I will come to thank you another day," Nanny Yu said gratefully. "Nanny Yu, how do you know my second sister? Did you make a mistake?" Qin Yuru asked with an unkind look and stirred the handkerchief in her hand fiercely. "That day, old madam took me out. Unexpectedly, she suddenly got sick. I was in a hurry to bring old madam back, so I took a shortcut and happened to meet Second Mrs. Carriage. No one could get out. The situation was very urgent. Second Miss came to treat our old madam, and then our old madam woke up." Nanny Yu sat down again and said gratefully. She was sincerely grateful to Qin Wanru. If it weren't for Qin Wanru that day, even if they arrived at the mansion, old madam would have had an accident. Later, the doctor who had been treating old madam for a long time also said that old madam almost died. If old madam died, as an accompanying old maid, even if she was old madam's henchman, she couldn't escape the guilt. From this point of view, Qin Wanru not only saved old madam, but also her. Second sister's medical skills are so good? Is it just a few needles at random? Qin Yuru didn't believe Qin Wanru and snorted. "Second Mrs. medical skills are very good. I saw you when you dropped the needles. I knew you were very skilled. You must have practiced a lot. I didn't expect second miss to have such good medical skills at such a young age. You are really amazing. Nanny Yu praised. The more she looked, the more she liked Wanru. Nanny Yu, it's all in the past. Don't mention it. Didn't you say that you wanted to talk to my second sister? Now she is here. Nanny Yu, please speak frankly. Seeing that Nanny Yu was still praising Qin Wanru, Qin Yuru immediately became impatient. She picked up the teacup at hand, took a sip, put it down heavily and urged. There were some words that Nanny Yu really wanted to say. This time she came here on the order of old madam. She was still a little uncertain, but when she saw the plate of pastries, she became more sure. Since it was the blood of the heir of Duke Xing, it couldn't be bullied, so Nanny Yu wanted to deter Qin Wanru. But now, Qin Wanru had saved Madame Dowager, so she couldn't say what she was going to say. Nanny Yu coughed in a low voice and hesitated. Nanny Yu, you'd better say it quickly. Madame Dowager of your mansion is still waiting for your reply. Qin Wanru became more and more unhappy, and her face darkened. Nanny Yu coughed again in a low voice. She knew she had to say it. She looked at Qin Wanru and the smile on her face disappeared. She said seriously, Second Miss, Madame Dowager likes First Miss very much. I heard that First Miss had a dispute with you when she left Duke Xing's mansion. The reason was that Madame Dowager sent a pair of blood jade bracelets to First Mississippi. She was afraid that you two would have objections, so she specially asked me to bring a pair of blood jade bracelets. Her words sounded polite. It seemed that Madame Dowager still wanted to send a gift to Qin Wanru even after such a thing happened. But after careful consideration, it was extremely vicious. It was clear that what happened yesterday was caused by Qin Wanru's jealousy of Qin Yuru. She envied that Qin Yuru got a pair of blood jade bracelets from Madame Dowager, so she deliberately made such a thing to make Qin Yuru lose face. Moreover, she also smashed the pair of blood jade bracelets that Qin Yuru was wearing at that time. It was all Qin Wanru's fault. Yujia was so angry that her face turned pale. She glared at Nanny Yu with hatred and hated herself in her heart. If she had known this, she would not have asked her miss to save Madame Dowager. She even viciously put all the blame on her Mississippi. After Nanny Yu finished speaking, she clapped her hands. A servant girl behind her came over with a brocade box in her hand. Nanny Yu took the brocade box and opened it. She handed it to Qin Wanru with a smile and said, Second Miss Qin, please accept it. If she really accepted this pair of jade bracelets, she would deny what Nanny Yu had said before. That was to say, the quarrel between the two sisters in the street yesterday was designed by Qin Wanru. She deliberately made Qin Yuru make a scene and smashed her bracelets. It was all because Qin Wanru was jealous that Qin Yuru got the favor of Madame Dowager. If she didn't accept it, Madame Dowager of Duke Xing's mansion was both an elder and a noble person. How could Qin Wanru refuse to accept it? Up to now, Qin Wanru had to accept it. She had to bear the reputation of being narrow-minded and scheming against her elder sister. It had to be said that Madame Dowager of Duke Xing's mansion was really cruel and merciless. I dare not accept Madame Dowager's gift. If Madame Dowager wants to, you'd better give the bracelets to Big Sister. Qin Wanru said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. How dare you, Qin Wanru? How dare you refuse the gift from Madame Dowager of Duke Xing's mansion? Don't you know that you can't refuse the gift from an elder? Seeing that Qin Wanru really dared to refuse, Qin Yuru immediately became serious and said harshly, What do you want to say, Big Sister? Seeing Qin Yuru like this, Qin Wanru had an idea. She sneered and said, Big Sister, do you mean that you want me to admit it and show that it was all my fault? I was jealous of Big Sister, so I schemed against Big Sister, so that Big Sister lost control in the street and beat and scolded me? She didn't believe that Nanny Yu would still have the face to force her to admit it after she said it. As for the father sitting above, she couldn't ignore him anymore. Qin Wanru, what nonsense are you talking about? Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows, stood up, and scolded harshly. Big Sister, don't you understand what I said? Qin Wanru asked and turned to Nanny Yu. Nanny Yu, even if Madame Dowager likes Big Sister, she can't let others think so, right? I heard that Madame Dowager is kind, so she probably didn't consider this. Please take back the bracelets, Nanny Yu. If she didn't take back the bracelets, it would mean that Madame Dowager did have evil intentions. Although Madame Dowager had a noble status, it was inconvenient for her to intervene in the affairs of the inner courtyard of Qin's mansion. Qin's mansion and Duke Xing's mansion had nothing to do with each other. What made Nanny Yu blush was that Qin Wanru had saved Madame Dowager's life before. Madame Dowager's behavior was obviously to bite the hand that fed her. Even though Nanny Yu had prepared some other words to deal with Qin Wanru, at this time, under the gaze of Qin Wanru's watery eyes, she felt that she couldn't say it. She gave a hollow laugh and took back her hand. Since second Miss Qin doesn't like it and even misunderstood Madame Dowager's kindness, then forget it. Madame Dowager will send someone to send another thank you gift next time. I don't dare to accept Madame Dowager's thank you gift. I study medicine to cure diseases and save people. If I see someone sick, it's too much not to help, and I can't accept Madame Dowager's thank you. Qin Wanru's face became more and more peaceful, as if the other party was not the noble Madame Dowager of Duke Xing's mansion, but an ordinary old woman she met on the road. Qin Wanru, you really dare to not accept Madame Dowager's thank you. You are presumptuous. Seeing that Nanny Yu was acting like a big thunder, Qin Yuru immediately became anxious. Big sister, do you want to force me to admit it? Qin Wanru slightly narrowed her eyes and asked. What do you mean by forcing you to put it down? This is originally your business. How dare you not admit it? It is obvious that you deliberately smashed my blood jade bracelets and said that I did it. Qin Wanru, God is watching what you do. Thinking of what happened yesterday, Qin Yuru screamed angrily. Seeing that Nanny Yu was useless, how could she not be anxious? Yuru, shut up. Qin Huayong's face was very ugly. Seeing that Qin Yuru was about to scream ungracefully again, he suddenly shouted harshly. I. Qin Yuru gritted her teeth and glared at Qin Wanru fiercely. She felt that she really couldn't suppress her anger. Father, it was Qin Wanru who hurt me yesterday. Father, if you don't believe me, you can go to the street and ask a passerby. Qin Wanru replied calmly. Whether it was their behavior, tone, or even their eyes, everyone present felt that Qin Wanru was more credible. Looking at Qin Yuru's resentful and almost ferocious face, it was clear that she was jealous and hateful. It was really clear at a glance that someone had deliberately caused such a thing because of jealousy. Nanny Yu took a step back and handed the brocade box in her hand to the little servant girl beside her. The little servant girl took a few steps back, so did Nanny Yu. She frowned. Now she didn't know how to solve this matter. If the second miss in front of her was not the miss who saved her Madame Dowager, Nanny Yu felt that she could go forward to threaten her with the power of Duke Xing's mansion. After all, she was just an unmarried miss who came from a small place. It was not difficult to frighten her a little and give her some benefits. However, it was this Mississippi. No matter how capable Nanny Yu was, she felt that her face was burning and she couldn't say a word. Glancing at the exquisite pastries on the table, Nanny Yu sighed in her heart. In this situation, she really didn't know what to do. This first Miss Qin seemed to be the biological granddaughter of Madame Dowager and the daughter of her deceased son. If she had some doubts when she came to the mansion before, they all disappeared when she saw the pastries. She hadn't seen such pastries for more than 10 years. They were made with the molds brought by Infanta Qinghua when she first married. Later, this set of molds was taken away by Infanta Qinghua. She didn't expect to see them again after many years. Now Nanny Yu was 100% sure of Qin Yuru's identity. But what made her sigh was that this lady seemed to have been spoiled by Madame D. How could she be so petty and impatient? What should she do? Chapter 342. Nanny Yu, where did old Madame go that day? With old Madame's health, it seems that she should not go out too tired. Qin Wanru turned to look at Nanny Yu, rolled her eyes, and suddenly smiled. Nanny Yu's heart skipped a beat. She immediately remembered that old Madame did go out for something that day and made a lot of noise after coming back. Later, in order to find Qin Wanru, Old Madam specially called Madam of Duke Xing over and asked her to send someone to find Qin Wanru. Many people in the mansion knew that a miss surnamed Qin had saved Old Madam. At that time, in order to find Qin Wanru, Nanny Yu specially described Qin Wanru's characteristics very clearly. She was still young, but looked generous, knew medical skills, and had a delicate appearance. When she grew up, she would definitely be a stunning beauty. Her surname was Qin, and she was not well known in the capital city in the past. Nanny Yu was really grateful at that time and described it in detail. Now it was almost the truth. If Old Madam still threatened Qin Wanru, she would be ungrateful. Nanny Yu did not dare to let Old Madam bear this reputation. Thank you for your concern, Second Mississippi. I thank you on behalf of Old Madam. Second Miss, I still have something to do in the mansion. I will come to thank you next time. It was too unexpected to meet Qin Wanru. Nanny Yu felt that she had to go back and discuss it with Old Madam. At this time, she could not act rashly. She immediately stood up and said with a smile, "If Old Madam bore the reputation of being ungrateful, it would be bad for the reputation of the whole Duke Xing's mansion." This was a great responsibility. Nanny Yu, didn't Old Madam say that she still has something to say to second sister? Seeing that Nanny Yu actually retreated, Qin Yuru was anxious. I have said what I wanted to say to second miss just now. Since this matter is not what Old Madam thinks, I'd better ask the two misses to communicate with each other. If sisters get along well with each other, people will think that Qin's mansion is polite and prosperous. I hope the two misses will give way. Nanny Yu said with a smile. It seemed that she was persuading them to reconcile, indicating that for the reputation of Qin's mansion, they should not have a dispute. However, she did not mention anything about Duke Xing's mansion. It seemed that she had nothing to do with it. Qin Yuru was so angry that her eyes widened. This old servant did not say this just now. Qin Wanru glanced at Nanny Yu calmly and did not answer. She had already thought of this kind of thing when she first met Nanny Yu in Duke Xing's mansion. No matter whether Old Madam acknowledged her kindness in her heart or not, she would certainly not appear to be ungrateful on the surface. Old Madam's old Qin Yuru. As an old maid, Qin's Yu, she was Yu's Yan's Yu's Qin's Qin had your, Qin's Yu, Old Mad us, Qin's Madam, Qin Yu, Qin, Madam, Qin Yu, Qin. It was Qin Wanru's original plan to let Nanny Yu see her when Qin Yuru was self-righteous. That was why she hid behind Madam Dowager that day in order to avoid Nanny Yu's eyes. Next, it depended on Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion to deal with this matter. Of course, the most important thing was to lure Madam of Duke Xing to step in. How dare you? Seeing that Nanny Yu did not say anything substantive, Qin Yuru was so angry that her face turned pale, and she scolded Nanny Yu harshly. You, sit down. Nanny Yu is right. Harmony between sisters is the way to prosperity. You should get along with your second sister more in the future. Qin Huaiyong interrupted her and said with a cold face. Father, Qin Yuru still wanted to explain, but Qin Huaiyong did not want to listen to her anymore. He waved his hand and said, Go back and write down the women's precepts and women's rules first, and learn more etiquette from Nanny Huang. Nanny, Qin Yuru was unwilling to be sent back like this. She came here full of expectations, and she turned to Nanny Yu and said loudly. At this time, she was really a little flustered. Why was it different from what her mother said? She glanced at the pastries on one side. Didn't her mother say that as long as people from Duke Xing's mansion saw the pastries, they would stand on her side? Qin Wanru was doomed. First miss, learn etiquette well. I'm leaving. Nanny Yu also had a headache. The situation at present had already exceeded her imagination. She bowed to Qin Huaiyong again, and then turned and left in a hurry with several servant girls and old maids. She had to report this matter to Old Madam first and let her make a decision. Although Miss Sun should be the first miss, Duke Xing's mansion could not do anything to suppress second miss who was Old Madam's benefactor. Originally, he wanted to put all the pressure on second Miss Qin. He thought that as an unmarried miss in boudoir, she would have some courage and come from a small place. On the one hand, he could force her to admit this matter. On the other hand, he could promise her certain benefits and promise to find a good marriage for her. With both carrot and stick, she didn't believe that second Miss Chin would not give in. But she didn't expect that second Miss Chin was old Madam's benefactor. Nanny Yu left in a hurry, and Qin Yuru left in tears. Only Qin Huaiyong and Qin Wanru were left in the study. Qin Huaiyong frowned and looked very tired. He reached out to touch his forehead and sighed deeply. He looked at Qin Wanru and seemed to want to say something, but when the words came to his mouth, he stopped. Qin Wanru lowered her head, and her long eyelashes fluttered a few times. Her eyes fell on the edge of her dress. It was very quiet in the study, so quiet that Yu Jie, who stood behind Qin Wanru, also felt uncomfortable. She secretly looked at Qin Huaiyong, who was sitting on the chair, and carefully leaned to Qin Wanru. She felt that the atmosphere in the study was too heavy. Wanru, do you know old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion? After a long time, Qin Huaiyong asked gently. Qin Wanru raised her head and said, No, I just thought that she was an ordinary old madam. I didn't expect that she was old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion. This is really a coincidence. Qin Huaiyong said, With this matter, Duke Xing's mansion should not make things difficult for you anymore. I was worried about you before. Now I can finally rest assured about you. But your big sister? I have never cared about the affairs of the inner court in the past. I didn't expect that she has become like this. Qin Huaiyong looked very tired. If I had known this, I would not have neglected your education at that time. I thought that Madame D would manage the affairs of the mansion well and educate you. Now Madame D has taken charge of the affairs of the mansion. Your grandmother and I don't intend to let her come out again. But your big sister? I only hope that you and your sister can get along well. Father, Nanny Huang is a good etiquette instructor. Big sister will be fine. Qin Wanru said obediently. That's good. You can go back first. Qin Huaiyong showed a smile on his face. It could be seen that he was reluctant. How could he, as a father, be really happy when such a thing happened? Qin Wanru stood up and said goodbye. But when she walked a few steps, she was stopped by Qin Huaiyong. He pointed to the pastries on the table and said, I heard that Wanru likes these pastries very much. When you are free, ask the kitchen to make more. Thank you, father. Qin Huaiyong shook his head and smiled bitterly. With a little sadness in his voice, he said, Wanru, don't blame me for neglecting you too much. Father, I am a man. I am in charge of external affairs. You can't blame me for this. Qin Wanru said softly. Qin Huaiyong's face was slightly bitter. He waved his hand and motioned her to leave. When she came out of Qin Huaiyong's study, Qin Wanru slowed down. She looked back at the gate of the courtyard where the study was located, and her eyes were slightly dim. Neglecting you is not neglecting you. Miss, did you forget anything? Yu Jie also looked back along her gaze and found nothing. Qin Wanru shook her head, frowned slightly and walked forward. After a few steps, she suddenly turned in another direction. It was not the way back to Jifeng Pavilion. Miss, where are you going? Yu Jie asked in surprise. Hearing her question, Qin Wanru turned back to the direction she had walked before. She looked calm and told Yu Jie, In a while, ask the new old maid in the kitchen to make a pastry for me. Tell her that I like her pastries and ask her if there are any special pastries she can make. Miss, do you think there is something wrong? Yu Jie asked cautiously. Qin Wanru shook her head. Until now, she had not found anything wrong, but she had an intuition that there was something wrong with this old maid. Even her father mentioned it just now. It seemed that he felt guilty for not caring about her before. Let her make some first and let me have a look. Qin Wanru was sure that there should be something special about the previous pastries. Looking at Nanny Yu's previous appearance, it was clear that she intended to suppress her by force. After thinking for a while, she turned in another direction. This time, she went to Madame Dowager's Xining Pavilion. Hearing that Qin Wanru came over, Madame Dowager hurriedly asked someone to invite her in. As soon as she entered the door, she asked with concern, Zhuozhuo, why did your father call you over just now? Why was your big sister released again? What did the people from Duke Xing's mansion want to say? Madame Dowager had already known what happened in the outer courtyard before, but she could not say anything because Qin Huaiyong called her over. She had planned to ask someone to call Qin Wanru over after she came back. Seeing Madame Dowager's concerned face, Qin Wanru felt warm in her heart. She walked over and reached out to hold Madame Dowager's hand and said softly, "Grandma, don't worry. It's all right now." "What on earth is going on?" Madame Dowager pulled Qin Wanru to sit beside her and still asked worriedly. "Nanny Yu, who serves old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion, came over and said that she would give me a pair of blood jade bracelets. She asked me not to have a dispute with my big sister. Naturally, sisters should be harmonious." Qin Wanru vaguely told the purpose of Nanny Yu's visit. Although she said it vaguely, Madame Dowager understood what she meant. She was so angry that her face turned pale. What does old Madame mean? How could she do such a thing? Even if she likes Yuru, she can't do this. She wants to push the blame onto you. "Let's go, I will take you to refuse." Madame Dowager stood up and said angrily. She immediately had no good impression of this old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion. "Grandma, I refused. It's all right now." Qin Wanru smiled and pulled Madame Dowager to sit down again. "After you refused, did Nanny Yu say anything else?" Madame Dowager asked. Since she came and said such words, it meant that Duke Xing's mansion strongly supported Qin Yuru. Chapter 343. Grandma, why are these cakes so exquisite? I heard that Nanny Yu specifically asked about the pastries in Father's study just now. Qin Wanru asked with a smile. She picked up a piece of cake and looked at it carefully. "I didn't look at it carefully when I used it before." "Did Nanny Yu ask about the pastries?" Madame Dowager's expression changed slightly. Qin Wanru nodded with a little surprise in her eyes. "Grandma, is there anything special about these cakes?" Madame Dowager took the pastry from her hand, looked at it and frowned. Suddenly, she turned to Nanny Duan and asked hurriedly, "Zhuoxua's set of pastry molds. Go and have a look." "Which set?" Nanny Duan didn't understand at first. When old grandma mentioned Qin Wanru, she immediately opened her eyes wide and asked, "Old grandma, are you talking about second Mrs. Set?" "Yes, that's the set. Other sets don't have such exquisite molds." Old grandma nodded and said, "Then I'll go and have a look right away." Nanny Duan seemed to think of something. She glanced at Qin Wanru and turned to leave in a hurry. "Grandma, what do you mean by that? Which one is mine?" Qin Wanru raised her little face and shook Madame Dowager's sleeves, asking in confusion. Old grandma looked hesitant. She looked at Qin Wanru's face and wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. After a long while, she sighed and said, "Zhuozhua, that set of molds is yours. They were made when you were young. They have always been there. You liked them very much when you were young, so I kept them for you. Then I put them away. How could there suddenly be cakes made with this set of molds in the kitchen?" "My favorite?" Qin Wanru looked confused. "Yes, they are yours," old grandma said with certainty this time. She reached out and touched Qin Wanru's hair with a little bitterness in her eyes. Qin Wanru's long eyelashes fluttered a few times to hide the trace of deepness at the bottom of her eyes. As expected, the mold was not originally in Madame D's hands. Even if she secretly took it away, she dared not let old grandma find out. Otherwise, she would have taken it out earlier to increase Qin Yuru's bargaining power. This time, he had no choice but to do it. Of course, he also took into account that the old mistress might have long forgotten about this matter. In her previous life, Qin Wanru had never seen this set of molds, but she had heard of this kind of exquisite pastry. It was said that Qin Yuru loved it very much, and every time there were guests, she would definitely take it out and present it. Qin Yuru originally thought that it was because of the outstanding pastry, but she didn't think that it was because the pastry mold was not simple. At that time, even if Qin Yuru didn't officially reveal her identity, perhaps everyone secretly thought that she was her mother's biological daughter. After what happened to Qin Yuru yesterday, Madame D had to increase her bargaining chips. If Grandma went to see her and she took the Qingsu grass sachet with her, Grandma's body, which was not easy to recover, would be in trouble. In the past, Madame D didn't dare to do this kind of thing openly, but now she definitely dared to do it. She was now imprisoned in the yard and desperately wanted to get out. Madame Dowager was a mountain on her head, so she should desperately want to make Madame Dowager fall. Madame Dowager, second miss is right. Don't be angry and think about it carefully. Even if you go to ask Madame D now, I don't think I can get the answer. At that time, the mold was lost by itself and no one saw Madame D's people take it. Even if you ask the people in the kitchen now, the people in the kitchen may only say that this set of mold just appeared there and no one knows who took it. There are many people in the kitchen and it is not something lost, so no one can tell the reason. Nanny Duan deserved to be Madame Dowager's henchman. She had always been familiar with the affairs of Qin's mansion. She persuaded Madame Dowager with only a few words and helped her sit down again. A servant girl came in and whispered to Nanny Duan. Nanny Duan nodded, waved her hand to signal her to leave, and then said to Madame Dowager, "Madame Dowager, the supervisor of the kitchen said that no one knows who took that set of mold and when it was put in the corner of the kitchen. The new old maid wanted to make pastries, so she rummaged through all kinds of molds and found it from below." Qin Wanru blinked her watery eyes and was not surprised by this result. Of course, Madame D would not really go against Madame Dowager. It seemed that this had nothing to do with her. The new old maid, the new pastry mold, and the exquisite and excellent pastries. Duke Xing's mansion just had an accident yesterday and they came in a hurry. When they saw such exquisite pastries, they would definitely look at them a few more times. If she guessed correctly, this set of mold should be an old thing in the former Duke Xing's mansion, so Nanny Yu would obviously be more familiar with it. This line of investigation was almost intertwined with each other. Madame Dowager of Duke Xing's mansion even guessed that when the rumor that Qin Yuru beat and scolded her in the street came out, Madame Dowager of Duke Xing's mansion would be anxious and send someone to suppress her. It could be said that Madame Dowager of Duke Xing's mansion had done everything. Of course, the old maid in the kitchen should not only do this. This was an old maid who had been arranged for a long time. Madame D, does she know what she is doing? Madame Dowager was so angry that her face turned pale, and she said with hatred, "Madame Dowager, don't be angry. What should we do now? Should we take this set of mold back and put it away again?" Nanny Duan walked behind Madame Dowager and patted her gently. "Put it away, wash it and put it in Zhuo's room." Madame Dowager patted the corner of the table angrily and said, "Grandma, since it is in the kitchen, just keep it." Qin Wanru smiled slightly and stopped her. "This pastry is really exquisite." "Keep it in the kitchen?" Madame Dowager looked at her little granddaughter with a puzzled look. "Yes, keep it first. This pastry is also very fragrant and tastes good. With such an exquisite mold, it can bring out the best in each other. If there are guests, it can be used to entertain them. It will also make them look good if they are taken out." Qin Wanru continued with a smile. "Besides, if you put away the mold at once, Madame D will know that you have already known it." Her words made Madame Dowager silent. She thought for a while and nodded. "Then don't take away the mold. Nanny Duan, ask someone to keep an eye on this set of mold and see who will touch it." "Madame Dowager, don't worry. Just now I sent someone to ask, and they are all trustworthy. They won't talk nonsense. I will ask them to keep an eye on it secretly." Nanny Duan was Madame Dowager's henchman. She immediately understood Madame Dowager's meaning and nodded repeatedly. Glancing at Qin Wanru's childish little face, she had to be convinced. The second miss was indeed different from ordinary young misses. She was more intelligent. She was so young but she was still so calm. She was really not an ordinary child. If Madame Dowager guessed correctly, the second miss should be the child of the heir of Duke Xing and Infanta Qinghua, the daughter of and great elder princess. This was the conclusion made by the information Madame Shui sent someone to inquire. This was also Madame Dowager's dilemma. If it was true, she must let the second miss acknowledge her ancestors and tell what had happened in the past. For so many years, Madame Dowager had not told her because she was afraid that the second miss had no relatives in her family. It was better to not know anything and raise her as her biological granddaughter. Now that the second miss had her own relatives, of course, this matter had to be told. But the problem was that it was related to the first Mississippi. Now the first Miss had intervened and made Duke Xing's mansion mistakenly think that she was the daughter of Infanta Qinghua. If Madame Dowager told the truth, the first Miss would be discredited. No matter what the first Miss had done, she was Madame Dowager's granddaughter. Madame Dowager was now also in a dilemma. Because of the first Miss's intervention, Nanny Duan did not know how to end this matter. She could not help but sigh secretly. A servant girl ran in breathlessly. Because of the panic, she almost fell when entering the door. When she arrived at the door of the main room, she had already reported, "Madame Dowager, the Empress Dowager sent someone here." Chapter 344. Nanny Duan turned around and walked to the door. When she lifted the curtain, she saw a sweaty servant girl running outside the curtain. "What did you say?" "The Empress Dowager from the palace sent someone to announce that she wants to take second Miss into the palace." The servant girl took a breath and finished her sentence. "What's the matter?" Madame Dowager asked anxiously. "I don't know what it is, but it's urgent. Right now, the carriage from the palace is ready at the door, and second Miss can enter the palace immediately," the servant girl said hurriedly. Madame Dowager was shocked that it was so urgent. The Empress Dowager didn't care about the affairs of the Imperial harem. Usually, it was the Empress who summoned her. When did the Empress Dowager bother her? "Grandma, it's okay. It should be the thing at the palace gate. It has something to do with Prince Qin. I heard that Prince Qin is the Empress Dowager's favorite grandson." Qin Wanru comforted Madame Dowager hurriedly when she saw that her face changed in shock. Something happened to Prince Qin? Madame Dowager was not comforted. The more she thought about it, the more panicked she became. Prince Qin was not in good health. He was already sick and it was said that he would not live long. Although he said it was okay before, if something really happened, the Empress Dowager would definitely blame Qin Wanru. "I don't think so. If something really happened, I'm afraid she wouldn't just let me enter the palace peacefully," Qin Wanru said with a smile. She looked gentle and calm. Looking at Qin Wanru's appearance, Madame Dowager was slightly relieved. She sat down again and said worriedly, "Then you can go. Be careful. Remember not to talk or look at them. You can't offend the nobles in the palace." "Grandma, don't worry. I will be careful." Qin Wanru nodded and then bowed respectfully to Madame Dowager. She rushed to the outer courtyard with Yu Jie. At this time, Qin Huayong also got the news. He hurried over and met Qin Wanru on the road. Qin Huayong was relieved and told Qin Wanru a few more words. After Qin Wanru left, Qin Huayong didn't return to the outer courtyard but went directly to Madame Dowager's Xining pavilion. The carriage stopped at the gate of the mansion early. Although it was not big, it looked more exquisite compared to the situation outside the palace. Qin Wanru got on the carriage with Yu Jie, and the carriage went all the way to the palace gate. When they arrived at the palace gate, the eunuch who was sent to pick her up showed her waist token to the Imperial bodyguard at the palace gate. The Imperial bodyguard checked it clearly and let the carriage enter the palace gate. Entering the palace, he changed to another palace sedan chair, which was carried by two little eunuchs all the way to the Empress Dowager's palace of Compassionate and Peaceful. This time was different from the last time she entered the palace. She was the only one on the way. The two little eunuchs also walked in a hurry. The time they spent on the journey was much shorter than the last time they entered the palace. When arriving at the Palace of Benevolent Peace, Qin Wanru looked at the other two palaces parked in front of the Palace of Benevolent Peace in astonishment. Her watery eyes were slightly gloomy. It seemed that she was not the one who came today, so she felt relieved. Chu Luchen should be fine. A beautiful palace maid was waiting in front of the Dan Palace. Seeing Qin Wanru coming over, she took 2 steps forward, bowed to her and asked, "Are you second Miss Qin?" "Old madam has been waiting for a long time. Please come in with me, second Miss Qin," the palace maid said with a smile. Qin Wanru nodded and followed her up the Dan Palace step by step. When they arrived at the palace gate, the palace maid asked her to wait for a moment and went in to report. Then she came out and led Qin Wanru inside. Qin Wanru walked in with her head down. As soon as she entered the main hall, She heard laughter inside, so she looked steadily forward at the moment. There were a lot of people in the main hall. There were 4 or 5 of them. Hearing the sound at the door, they all looked at Qin Wanru. This is the second miss of Qin's mansion. She is a beautiful person. Empress Dowager, you brought such a beautiful person here. She is better than all of us. The one who spoke was a new favorite concubine of the emperor. She was about 15 or 16 years old and looked beautiful. At this time, she covered her face with a fan and smiled. Yes, she is so outstanding. Empress Dowager likes the beautiful little girl again and doesn't like us. Another said with a smile. They all stayed in Empress Dowager's palace after coming to pay their respects. In the past, they were familiar with Empress Dowager and had some face in front of Empress Dowager. Therefore they dared to make some jokes. I just heard some interesting things and specially called her over to ask her. How did it become that I don't like you? Empress Dowager smiled gently, but looked at Qin Wanru with a bit of fierceness and criticism in her eyes. She frowned. The 2 sisters of Qin's mansion fought in the street for a pair of blood jade bracelets, which was really shameful. Originally, she was a little dissatisfied with Qin Wanru. At this time, she increasingly disliked her. It was just a pair of bracelets. How could she be so petty and fight like this? If Qin doted on other women and rewarded other women in the future, would they also fight with Qin and make Prince Chen's mansion into a mess? Chen's body couldn't stand such nonsense. Feeling the sharp eyes above, Qin Wanru became more cautious. After entering the door, she looked steadily at Empress Dowager on the high seat, knelt down, and saluted respectfully. Greetings, Empress Dowager. Raise your head. Empress Dowager's voice came from above. Qin Wanru raised her head, and her long eyelashes fluttered over her eyes. She looked calm and natural. This kind of unhurried look made Empress Dowager show a faint smile on her face. Even if she had no family background and could not be the legal wife, Empress Dowager also hoped that she would choose the best one for Chu Luqian, not the kind of woman who was fussy and couldn't show her face in public. Empress Dowager, the second miss of Qin's mansion, is so beautiful. I didn't see her clearly just now. Now I see her, she is really outstanding. And said with a smile, compared with this second Miss Qin, we are all old. The one who spoke was about 20 years old. Her words made the Empress Dowager laugh. You are so old, so I am so old that I can't even look at you. Empress Dowager can't be compared with us. Empress Dowager looks much younger than us. If I didn't tell you, I'm afraid that I'm a little older than you. This was also good at talking. She flattered Empress Dowager with a smile. Yes, Empress Dowager is much younger than us. If you have a good mentality, you will be young. Unlike us, we are all old. Another said with a smile. If Empress Dowager didn't say it, I couldn't guess it at the first time. The new favorite also joined in the fun. These words made Empress Dowager laugh more and more, and she scolded, You people, all of you come to make fun of me. Empress Dowager, how dare we? Yes, Empress Dowager, only God can prove our filial piety to you. How dare we make fun of you? Listening to the laughter above, Qin Wanru touched her knees, which faintly hurt because of kneeling. She knew that Empress Dowager deliberately didn't call her to show her strength. She blinked her watery eyes. She remembered that when she saw Empress Dowager last time, it seemed that Empress Dowager was not so hostile to her. Was it because of what happened yesterday? Thinking of this, she had an idea. After a long while, Empress Dowager seemed to see Qin Wanru. She stopped smiling and said lightly, Get up and sit aside. The palace maid who led the way came over and helped her up, and then helped her to the stool on one side. In front of Empress Dowager, there is no place for me to sit. Although Qin Wanru's knees were slightly trembling, she still stood in front of the stool in an orderly manner and did not sit down. Don't be so polite. Sit down first. Empress Dowager said indifferently. The palace maid held her hand and let her sit down. This time, Qin Wanru did not refuse and sat down naturally. What happened on the street yesterday? I heard that you 2 sisters quarreled in the street? How could such a thing happen to a miss from an aristocratic family? After Qin Wanru sat down, Empress Dowager's face darkened. Hearing Empress Dowager's rebuke, other people in the Great Hall even breathed lightly for a while. Qin Wanru was prepared in her heart and said respectfully, "Empress Dowager, I didn't quarrel with Big Sister yesterday. How can it be fake? Now the whole capital is talking about your disgraceful thing. Could it be that everyone is wrong?" Empress Dowager said with an unkind look. "Yes, I am. I and Big Sister were originally in the same car, but I remembered that Grandma was not feeling well before, so I wanted to get off and go to the car in front to accompany Grandma. My sister helped me, and then the bracelet was broken. My sister was very angry, but she didn't beat or scold me in the street. She just hurried to pick it up, so I helped her and accidentally bumped into me. There were many people on the street, so I couldn't see clearly, so I misunderstood that my sister beat or scolded me." Qin Wanru reported unhurriedly. Misses from aristocratic families had their own etiquette. Even if what happened yesterday was true, as a younger sister, she couldn't slander her sister in front of others. Moreover, the sisters of Qin's mansion were one in front of outsiders. If Qin Yuru was not good, Qin Wanru was naturally not good too. What's more, someone had deliberately spread the words wrongly. The purpose was to let Qin Wanru be punished by Empress Dowager. What did it mean that they quarreled and scolded each other in the street because of a pair of jade bracelets? The meaning of this sentence was the same as what Nanny Yu had said before, which meant that the cause was Qin Wanru. Otherwise, how could they quarrel because of a pair of jade bracelets? The so-called jade bracelets were only the pair given by old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion to Qin Yuru. Qin Yuru got the jade bracelets herself, so of course, she wouldn't quarrel with her because of this. It must be that she was jealous, so they quarreled and made such a thing. The person who spread the words was really vicious. He knew that it was impossible for him to say that it was Qin Yuru who made it in front of Empress Dowager. Chapter 345. Is it really just a misunderstanding? Empress Dowager said doubtfully. She felt that Qin Wanru's words were not credible, but Qin Wanru's face was too calm, which made Empress Dowager feel that if she lied, she could not be so calm. Empress Dowager, it is indeed a misunderstanding. After returning to the mansion, my father and grandmother also inquired about it. Qin Wanru replied calmly, looking gentle and indifferent. Where is your big sister? Empress Dowager still felt that it was not credible, but this explanation was much better than the previous one. If it was just a misunderstanding, it was not bad. Big sister is now in the mansion. Qin Wanru replied naturally. Seeing that Qin Wanru answered extremely obediently, Empress Dowager showed a smile on her face again. She leaned back and waved her hand. Severalists knew that Empress Dowager had something to say to these misses in front of them, so they immediately stood up and said goodbye. Empress Dowager nodded, squinted slightly, and watched them leave. Outside the Palace of Benevolent Peace, got on the palace sedan chair one by one. Only the newly favored one looked at the chief imperial maid beside her, stood in the corner, and lowered her voice to ask, "Where is the emperor?" "He is still in the imperial study. The eunuch of the emperor told you not to inquire about the emperor's behavior casually, otherwise you will provoke the emperor's anger." The palace maid warned her master in a low voice. "What are you afraid of? The emperor promised to come to my palace recently." The newly favored surname was Li. She was not of high status and was conferred the title of Ronghua. But because she just entered the palace, she was pampered and spoke without scruples. "I'd better not inquire about it. If the emperor comes, he will come." The palace maid still lowered her voice and said. There were some things that she did not dare to say. Compared with Li Ronghua, who just entered the palace maid had been in the palace for a long time. I don't believe that the emperor can do anything to me. Continue to keep an eye on him and see where he went. Could he have gone to another vixen? The emperor has promised me, Li Ronghua said proudly as she raised her head. She was also favored in the palace, so she was not so afraid of the emperor. "Yes, your highness." The palace maid said helplessly. "Sister Li, what are you talking about? Why don't you leave? Do you want to stay here?" And who had already gotten on the palace sedan chair asked with a smile. "No, I'm leaving right away. I don't have the good fortune to have the Empress Dowager stay. Although Li Ronghua secretly curled her lips, she didn't show it on her face. Who in the palace didn't have a few faces? Seeing people speak human words, seeing ghosts speak ghost words. At that time, she felt that they were not like biological sisters, but like a miss to a servant girl. The younger sister of Duke Xing's lineal descent was very respectful to her elder sister, and her behavior was full of flattery to her elder sister. It seemed that Madame of Duke Xing was really anxious. This kind of anxiety was even no less than that of Madame D, who was anxious to get her daughter into Duke Xing's mansion. Both Madame of Duke Xing and Madame D were unwilling to see her return to her family and would definitely stop her. Since they wanted her to return to her family, she would first see what they would do. After what happened today, Madame of Duke Xing should be more anxious, right? It was good that they were anxious. She was afraid that they were not anxious. The three young madams followed the palace maid sent by Nanny Wei to the place where Chu Luchen lived with 3 servant girls respectively. At first, it was quiet, but after walking for a while, the 2 young madams became restless. Xiao Jie and that young madam should know each other. The 2 young madams whispered and looked back at Qin Wanru from time to time with a trace of contempt on their faces. It seemed that they were gossiping about Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru ignored them and followed the palace maid without looking sideways. As the 2 young madams talked, they found that Qin Wanru ignored them, so their voices became louder. How dare she grab the bracelets in the street at such a young age? How ignorant she is! Xiao Jie sneered and curled her lips sarcastically. Although she did not directly say it was Qin Wanru, the meaning of her words was Qin Wanru. Yes, it seems that she is good at pretending. Another delicate young madam gently pressed the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief, looking very disgusted. This was almost a blatant slap in the face. Looking at the palace maid who led the way in front, Qin Wanru did not have the slightest intention to help. Qin Wanru's eyes were dark, and she suddenly turned to look at the 2 young madams. Who are you talking about? Could it be that the 2 misses think that the Empress Dowager is wrong? The Empress Dowager agreed with her explanation just now, so she did not pursue it anymore. The 2 young madams did not expect that Qin Wanru dared to talk back, and her words were so fierce that they were choked and tongue-tied for a while. The young madam, who Qin Wanru did not know, reacted faster. After a short pause, she immediately reacted and retorted, "Why are you so anxious? We are not talking about you." This matter involved the Empress Dowager, so they certainly did not dare to say that the Empress Dowager was wrong. "Yes, we are not talking about you. Why are you so guilty?" Xiao Jie also came to her senses at this time. She raised her eyes and squinted at her from above, looking both arrogant and noble. Qin Wanru was almost amused by her acting like a daughter of lineal descent. She was imitating Xiao Yenru, acting like the eldest daughter of lineal descent. She was obviously just an inconspicuous daughter of lineal descent. No matter who you are talking about, if you don't talk about me, can you talk about others? Is this what the 2 young madams have taught you to behave like this? Qin Wanru asked unhurriedly. Her words made the 2 young madams angry and ashamed, and their faces turned red. If they were not in the palace, they would definitely quarrel with Qin Wanru. Peeping at the palace maid who seemed to hear nothing, the 2 young madams did not dare to be presumptuous after all. They just glared at Qin Wanru fiercely. The 2 young madams secretly gritted their teeth and looked at each other. They did not dare to quarrel openly, but they could ignore Qin Wanru. In the following way, the 2 young madams did not talk about Qin Wanru, but they talked about the topic of the harmony between sisters. They also talked about which family's younger sister beat her elder sister, and she would not get a good retribution, and then she would lose her reputation. Qin Wanru didn't say anything about herself, so she didn't pay attention to them. She looked at the palace maid who was calm and expressionless in front of her and followed them slowly, as if she didn't hear the harsh sounds in their words. Chu Liuchen's palace was in front of them, and 2 guards were guarding at the door. Seeing several people coming, they immediately stepped forward to stop them. The palace maid who led the way bowed sideways and said, "Empress Dowager asked me to bring these 3 young madams to send medicinal materials for Prince Chen. Another guard stepped forward, looked at the medicinal materials in the hands of the 3 servant girls, looked them over a few times, and felt there was no problem. Then he stepped aside and waved his hand. The group of people was let in. As soon as they entered the door, before they could see the scene in the palace clearly, they saw a white shadow flashed by and went straight to them. Xiao Jie and the young madam walked in front of Qin Wanru. As soon as the guard let them in, the 2 young madams rolled their eyes at Qin Wanru and strode in. The white shadow first jumped on the young madam, and the young madam touched it subconsciously. She only felt that the bottom of her hand was furry, and then she saw a pair of blue eyes. She was so scared that she screamed and pushed it away. This time, it hit Xiao Jie. Xiao Jie let out an earth-shattering scream, took a step back, and fell heavily to the ground. She didn't know if she had tripped the lady from before, but the lady stumbled and fell as well. The 2 young madams shouted in panic. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.